Okay, guys, I'll get started now. Thank you so much to Sana and Noor for joining us, and thank you so much to all of the participants. So welcome. This is our How to Get into Dental School in the USA webinar, where you can learn all about the blueprint for getting into dental school. We're going to be covering 4 different modules in this presentation here. Going over is dentistry for you, starting on the journey, different experiences and timelines on how to start and factors with starting, as well as dental schools in more details. Also, additional topics that will be reviewed, and we'll go over all of these in the presentation, so you don't have to worry about us missing anything. But I wanted to give a quick introduction on who we are here at Bright Future Dentist. We're a student-led pre-dental organization dedicated to helping students on their pathway towards dentistry through different guest speakers and workshops, webinars, kind of like how you're experiencing here today, community service events, and so much more. We hope to equip students with the knowledge and insight into the field of dentistry. Ultimately, it's about creating a space for pre-dental students to form friendships and network with each other, and hopefully those connections can last along the way throughout their journey to dental school. So our team really hopes that throughout all of these things and through kind of joining our team, if you're interested in doing so, you'll develop leadership skills where you can grow and you can become leaders in your own communities. So our alumni, from kind of starting BFD over the years, have gone into many different dental schools, such as the ones that I've posted here: University of Toronto, Temple, Dalhousie, Sydney. They're all going to be attending these schools, but there's going to be some new schools added now that Sarah and Noor are also going to be joining USC. But yeah. I just wanted to quickly put some links up here. Join our WhatsApp group chat with the QR code on here if you're interested in. I always post notices for these events that we have, and it's also such a great way for you to ask questions in there. A lot of people just ask random questions here and there of like, oh, hey, like, what English course did you take? Or like, oh, do I need this for the school and stuff? And usually it's a great way for somebody that already has experience with that to be able to provide that advice for other pre-dental students. So it's a great virtual way to meet others that are like-minded. As well, follow us on Instagram for more event announcements and pre-dental resources. We have everything on our Linktree and as well as our website. So it's the ultimate hub for you guys to go towards that and get more information about the different topics that you want to learn about. But yeah, and I just wanted to kind of like put this out there to kind of get an idea if you guys were interested in having an event where you learn about financing dental schools and learning all about the student loans process, lines of credit, and how much you can expect for tuition and stuff. Just send me a message over through WhatsApp or even just send it in the WhatsApp group chat that we have, and we can potentially put together this event idea. And as well, almost last but not least, drop your questions in the chat box for answers. Typically, how we do this is throughout the webinar, you guys can ask all of your questions, and myself, Sarah, or Noor, maybe we can answer it throughout in the chat. But kind of what I like to do is at the Q&A section, we read out every single question so the answers can be shared for those that want to watch the recording. And yeah, so that's pretty much it from my side for our introduction. And I'm so excited to move on and introduce our speakers who are incoming first-year dentistry students at the Herman Ostrow School of Dentistry at the University of Southern California, to be determined because they're still waiting on some interview results, but for the most part committed because there's a hefty deposit that they paid. Anyways, so thank you, Sarah and Noor, for joining us, and I'll let you take the stage. Sarah, you're muted.
I am muted. After 4 years of online school, I'm just learning I learned how to blur my background today. But yeah, I went to York, as you can see. I have a lot of interests and hobbies, which I'll talk about the ones that are relevant to dental school in my journey to dental school. But yeah, I'm very excited to be here. I actually was just telling Noor and Shamim that I remember the webinar that I attended on how to apply to dental school, how to write the DAT. And it's very wholesome to be sitting here now talking about this topic.
My name is Noor. Thanks for having me, Shamim. And yeah, same here. Went to Ryerson, which is now called TMU. And our Instagrams are down there below. If you guys want to follow us, ask questions after the webinar, go for it. Nunu's Kitchen, which is my cooking hobby, and also Sarah's account. And yeah, we're just excited to help everybody on this journey so that hopefully everybody can apply and get into dental school for next year.
Yeah, so some of the schools that I got interviewed at. So I got interviewed at Roseman University in Utah, Temple University in Philadelphia, University of Southern California, and Case Western Reserve University in Ohio. And then just last week, heard back from Dalhousie, a Canadian school, but I have not heard back from them yet. So the acceptances that I've received so far have been listed on this page.
And oh, okay. And I got interviews at NYU, USC, UCC, and Dalhousie, and I got into all of them and waiting for Dalhousie's results.
Just wanted to mention again, I put a link in the chat for the resource list, so you can also see their school lists on there for all of the schools that Sarah and Noor apply to. As well, there's other useful links on there which you guys can check out too. But we're gonna move on to the first module, which is dentistry for you? And how to know if your interests and skills align with this career path. So there's, I think, a couple key questions that you should ask yourself when deciding if dentistry is a pathway that you want to go towards, such as, do you enjoy interacting with and helping others? Would you like a career that offers challenge and variety? Would you enjoy being self-employed potentially? Are you interested in helping people maintain and improve their oral health? Do you have good manual dexterity and spatial judgment? And that's, of course, something that you can improve over the years, but a lot of people already have hobbies such as maybe doing nails or knitting, and those can really factor into your skills as well. And lastly, do you have a keen memory and strong interest and ability in the sciences? Ultimately, these can make up your why dentistry, but everybody's why dentistry is very unique to them. And I'm going to pass it over to our speakers to kind of take on that question.
So for me personally, I think I had an orthodontist who was lovely, and that really jump-started my love for dentistry. And I really wanted to be an orthodontist for honestly as long as I can remember. I will mention though, in the middle of that, I did have a year of, wait, maybe I want to do medicine and I want to become a medical doctor. So in case any of you guys are maybe in that boat or were or will potentially face that challenge, I think it's really important to do some research in terms of the future that you're going to have. So for example, dentistry, after your 4 years of school, you can, specialize, or you can just start working. You can open your own clinic, your own practice. As for medicine, you have to do your 4 years of med school, then you have to do at least 3 years of residency, but usually it's 4 years or more. And then you're finally, you can either subspecialize or you can start working. So for me, I realized dentistry, I like the work-life balance a little bit more. I like the manual dexterity that's involved in it. And I really like the patient interaction that's more, it's like service-based a little bit more, I think, than medicine. So I liked that a lot. And on top of that, my sister is now in dental school. She's almost finishing. So that also helped to see her everyday lifestyle, to see what she's learning in school, if that kind of aligns with what I wanted to do. And of course, shadowing and doing things that we're going to talk about a bit later on helped to solidify why dentistry for me versus other fields.
Yeah, this question right here is the question they ask you in every single interview that you go to. So practice it from now on. But I grew up in a family of dentists, and I didn't actually always know that I wanted to be a dentist. In fact, for the longest time, I was asking myself the question of, what do I want to do for the rest of my life? As I mentioned earlier, I have a lot of hobbies, a lot of interests, so it was really difficult for me to navigate the answer to that question. And so I started focusing on the question of, what do I want to learn more about at this point in my life? And that really allowed me to navigate the steps that I had in front of me. I started reflecting on my interests, and so I play instruments. I love hosting. I like working with my hands. I paint quite often and I write a lot. So I put all of these together and then I reflected on what do I want to learn more about. And I realized they all had the common denominator of creating a transformative space. So as I was working, which I'll talk about later at a dental office, I saw the transformative power that was associated with the dental office. So patients would walk in. I remember this one instance of a patient walking in with a front chipped tooth. They left, they had a work presentation the next day that was very important to them. They left the office an hour later, confident that they could go to the work presentation. And that to me is that transformative space, the same thing that I see in hosting and music. So yeah, and as Noor said, the lifestyle, I appreciated that. And I saw it as a responsibility of mine to contribute as a healthcare professional to that field.
That's amazing. Thank you both so much. Yeah, I definitely think you guys really need to consider this question for each and every one of you. But there's many different things that you guys can do to kind of create that wide dentistry for yourself, such as shadowing dentists, talking to dentists, and as well as talking to dentists, which is exactly what Sarah Noor mentioned. But of course, researching and learning. I know there's lots of little like free modules you can do online about like what is dentistry and stuff, and like learning about different like aspects of dentistry. And there's so many people that post on YouTube and blog their lives about it. So it's definitely something for you to research and learn. And of course, make sure if this is a career path you want to go towards, because with every graduate program, there's a big commitment you need to make in terms of preparing yourself as that student. It's very hard to be a pre-dental and also, for example, be like a pre-med or something, because they just have very different application processes. And there is a lot of people that are, for example, pre-med and decide that they want to go into dentistry afterwards, like how Noor said. But you will kind of save yourself that financial strain and also maybe even mental strain if you kind of decide on that earlier on. So I also wanted to add on that along with talking to dentists and dental students, there's great ways that you can kind of get involved and reinforce your wide dentistry and also be in the headspace of going into dental school, such as going to network and volunteering at continuing education centers. In Toronto, there's two very big ones, such as Ever Smiles and Genesis, which are amazing. But you can also message dental students on Instagram. There's kind of a surge now of dental students blogging their lives and posting reels and stories and everything. So just honestly, like reach out to them on DMs and be like, hey, like I just wanted to ask some questions if you're open to it. If they don't respond, move on to the next one. But it's a great way for you to get involved with that. And here at Bright Future Dentists, we host an annual networking event, which has dentists, dental students, and pre-dentals all in the same room. So we kind of make that easier for you. You don't have to worry about that online barrier, and it's in person. I hope that we can have one this fall, but definitely there's lots of opportunities to do that. And of course, if you guys wanted to learn more about different dental student journeys and also dentist journeys, you can check out some of these recorded webinars that we have. We have one, which is What Does a Dentist Do? A Dental Career Pathway by Dr. Ranchberry. And as well, we have one, which is like a patient care webinar by Dr. Babul. And these two kind of really go over like how the dentist became a dentist, or even like what they do in their day-to-day life with patients. And as well, for those that were interested in what a dental lab technician does, we also have a webinar about that as well. But yeah, definitely check all of these out. They're all in our link tree. And going on to the next module, which is starting on this journey, creating a plan that's suitable for you. So there's definitely academic factors in your degree, which are a big part of applying to dental school, such as your GPA. You need a 3.0 to be eligible for, I think, every single dental school in America. But of course, the statistics and kind of general cutoffs for the GPAs that get accepted for each school are very different. So it's important to do your research and understand which schools kind of accept students in that GPA range which you are in. As well as taking your prerequisite course requirements and meeting minimum averages. In every single prerequisite course, you need to have at least a C+. So unfortunately, you can't necessarily pass with a D in your biology course and kind of have that accepted. It does have to have at least a minimum grade of C+. As well, making sure that the schools you want to apply to, do they have a full course load requirement, which means taking probably 10 courses or the equivalent value of credits for 10 courses throughout the entire fall winter year. Some courses don't even look at your summer credits in their GPA calculations. And some schools even take 2 of your years and you don't even have to finish your degree. So it's important to kind of research that for you. I've made a table which you guys can check out, and I'm going to be editing this table throughout the next month as I myself I'm applying to dental school, and it's going over every dental school and all of these different factors that's going to include with them. So I included the link to the spreadsheet, which you guys can copy and save, and you guys can start doing it on your own. Oh. Okay, nothing. But yeah, you guys can just do that on your own as well.
Sorry, just to add on to this page of, it's okay, you can skip it. But I just wanted to say, yes, you need a C+ at least to apply, but don't be scared. You're in this now and you can see it. For example, I first year really struggled with general chemistry and I got a C. And thankfully, my sister, having gone through this process, informed me like, hey, you can't do this, like for dental school. So I was fortunately able to redo it the next semester. But since you guys are all here, tell your friends that, it happens. And here I am. I still got into dental school. I redid my general chemistry that I got a C in. And here we are. So it's okay. Don't worry about it. But just it's good to be aware and to tell your friends and to try to kind of become try to prevent it, I guess, a little bit, just because I know sometimes if you take a course that's meant for like a second year course, but you take it in fourth year, there's a limit to how many you can take that's not in your actually like desired or designated year. So just be aware of that so you can like redo, at specific times or yeah. Okay, that's all.
Yeah. To add on to Noor's thing, for American schools, I know they don't necessarily have that exact requirement, but it's kind of this thing of like, okay, well, why are you taking all first year courses when you're fourth year of university? So keep that in mind too. I know for Western Schulich Dentistry, they have a specific requirement on their website. I myself haven't checked every single university for America, but it's always good to go over it. And it's also very easy to understand the pages. I don't think it's very difficult. So definitely make sure you do your research for the school you're going to go into. So different degree options. They always say pick an easy degree, but what does that really mean? The general rule of thumb is to pick a degree that you're interested in, and it's something that that not necessarily but you believe that you can excel in because it aligns with your interests, hopefully aligns with most of your skills. But also a degree that includes your prerequisites for dentistry is a big bonus because then you don't have to take on extra credits to be able to finish your degree. So I'm going to ask each of our speakers why they chose their degrees, and we'll go first with Sarah as to why you picked psychology.
Yeah, so I got enrolled in the Integrated Sciences program at York. This was a first-year program. It had all the sciences, so biochemistry, physics, and math. But it ended in my first year, so I had to pick a major for my second year. And short answer, I did not know why I took psychology at the time. Because I had never taken a psychology course before majoring in psychology, which was quite a risky thing to do. I recommend familiarizing yourself with the major you're taking. But long answer, I had done some research. I knew that York specifically had a very research heavy psych program. And I knew that regardless of what I wanted to do, and I mentioned this earlier, I had no idea what I wanted to do up until I think third year of university, that it was going to help me. There was going to be lots of writing, lots of statistics. And I also knew from working at a dental office, growing up, spending time in the dental office, and just my curiosity for people. I knew that I was curious in some questions. So why are some people scared when they walk into a dental office, and why are some people not? How do they react to that? How can you make them have a comfortable experience? And these were all questions I was curious about. I knew I could find the answers to these questions in psychology. So I did a Bachelor of Science in Psychology to sort of leave my options open. Again, there was lots of uncertainty at the time. I knew I didn't want to limit myself from the start. So I took as many courses in different fields as well as the sciences. So just in case dental school, med school, any of these were going to be my plan, then I could sort of stick to it, and I had the prerequisites to do so.
So biomedical sciences, I chose this because, as you can see, it's basically a pre-medical major, and that's the closest thing to a pre-dental major. We don't have biodental sciences yet. So I chose this because I really liked sciences. I like biology, but I knew in the biology program you'd have to do zoology, botany, and I didn't really want to study plants or animals. So I chose this instead, and the other courses that I had to take, I'm not gonna lie, were a little challenging, where maybe if I chose something either like psychology or maybe even biology, I wouldn't have had to take those specific ones that were super niche, like stem cell biology, cancer biology, or like all the different molecular or microbiologies. But overall, I found them super interesting. It's obviously hard when you have to upkeep a certain grade for dental school, but because I found the topics interesting, I still went through it and got through it. So that's why, as Shannon said, I recommend that it's something that you genuinely enjoy, because you're going to be in it for 4 or 5 or 6 years. So hopefully it's something that you can actually excel in, as she said. And I just found that, like she also said, it helps with already having to take the prerequisites, as it's a requirement for my degree. So I just kind of applied those, and if anything, had a bit more. And some of the universities that you're going to apply to don't mind the extra science courses, just because you're going to maybe learn a bit about them anyway in dental school. So yeah, that's why I chose biomedical sciences.
Thank you both so much. So yeah, there is definitely a difference between your degree requirements and your dental school requirements. Depending on what your degree is, you're probably going to have to even take extra biology courses if you're in a biology major, for example. Whereas for dental school, you don't necessarily need, I think, more than 9 credits of biology. So yeah, kind of also choosing a bachelor type is very important, because I know specifically at York University, which I've attended, that you can do either a Bachelor of Science or a Bachelor of Arts for a lot of the majors. Biology specifically, I know they don't offer a Bachelor of Arts, but for kinesiology and psychology, like myself and Sarah do, there is a BSc option or a BA option. And that kind of alleviates like a little bit of pressure for you having to take, I believe, a computer science, a math, and some of the general sciences that you need. But I opted to keep a BSc because those general sciences I was going to take anyways for dental school. So it would count towards my degree. It's funny because they recommended that you take 2 general science, and then I ended up taking like triple that amount. So that's just kind of how it goes, but it's all about when you're taking it and taking the appropriate courses to be able to obtain your undergrad, and also knowing what are the desired schools that you want to go to. Are you going to be applying to All American? Are you going to be applying to US and Canada? Or do you even want to apply internationally, like Noor did to Ireland and Australia and everything? So deciding which university suits you based on financials, curriculum, location, etc. You need to note down what these prerequisite courses are going to be. For example, Sarah didn't take anatomy, but me and Noor took anatomy. So there's some schools that don't even need you to take anatomy, but some schools that do want that. So definitely taking those appropriate courses so you can successfully apply is very important. So there is some general like questions that you can ask yourself. I feel like we've been over this, so I don't want to like spend too much time into it, but no matter what you're studying, your GPA matters, and your GPA won't necessarily set you apart from other people, but you need it to meet cutoffs. Some schools 3.0 flat, they don't care if you have anything more than that, because they look at your DAT and they look at other factors. Off the top of my head, even a Canadian school they want a 3.3 for U Alberta. Don't care if you have anything higher than that. It's about the rest of your application that matters. So getting involved with your faculty can definitely not just improve your extracurriculars, but it can help you focus on the academics you're involved in with your program, which is also a very important factor. And depending on if you're actually in the Faculty of Science or getting involved with the Faculty of Science at your school, that can maybe help you with letters of recommendation down the road. But we'll talk about all of that even more. Is there anything you wanted to add, Sarah and Noor?
I'll add in regards to the GPA, there's definitely minimums and cutoffs. I think the goal and the aim that you should aim at, and it's realistically, you're not gonna always get like sort of I don't know how to explain it. Realistically, there's going to be downfalls to you and the goals of having a high GPA, but I think you should have that goal and aim for it because there are real circumstances. There's going to be times where you're not as prepared for exams and you're going through things. So keep in mind that that cutoff is a cutoff, but also that when you're comparing applicants, that is also a part of. I'm not sure why Shamim is not here, but I'll continue speaking. So that cutoff is there, but definitely try to aim for higher GPAs. Or is there anything you wanted to add? And I'll try to share my screen and connect to the presentation.
Yes, do that. While you do that, first off, can everybody here write what year you're in, or if you're in high school, you're in high school? I just want to kind of get a general sense of where everybody's at. If you could just type it in the chat, that would be great. And while I do that, just add on, of course, it is a cutoff for some of them, and for some of them, it's not. For a lot of the universities, it does matter what your GPA is because they still look at that and think, okay, someone was really studying in their undergrad potentially, and maybe it's showing them that you have grit, or if you had some bad grades in first year like I did, and they see a trend that it's going upwards, your second, third, fourth year, it just keeps getting better because you're learning how to study, you're learning, what works for you. That's always great. But again, like Sarah said, don't look at it just as a cutoff. Definitely aim for as high as you can because, they say aim for the moon, aim for the stars, land on the moon, something like that. So I definitely think try your best, and again, retake courses if you need to, and reach out to your profs if you're not doing well in a course. Like, end of the day, these are profs that want students for the most part to do well. So reach out, ask what the best ways that you can do well in the courses. And yeah, okay. Also, I see majority are like second year. We have some in fourth. Okay, so that's good. And high school. Perfect. We've covered all bases.
Lovely. And Shamim's back, which is great.
All right. Okay, we got this slide covered, Shannon. I think you can go.
And please continue dropping the questions in the chat. I see some that are coming. We'll definitely go back to them in the Q&A if we're not answering them now. So just drop them now.
Yeah, as soon as it comes to your mind, just drop it down below.
I hope we are still live because it says we're still live. But if somebody can double check that for me and let me know, that would be amazing. Let's finish up. Okay. So these are a list of the York University pre-dental requirements. These are not all of the prereqs that you have to take for every single school, but generally, depending on what the school needs from you, you have to take like the necessary ones. So for example, I know some schools want math, some schools want microbiology, some schools definitely need English for American. The rule of thumb is always Gen Chem, Organic Chem, biology, physics, humanities for some, biochem some. Oh, sorry guys, my YouTube is, I think, echoing. Let me just double check. No. Maybe that was somebody else's echo. You get thrown out of one Zoom and then you freak out with everything else that goes on.
The leadership position prepare you for the stress you're going to have. And I'm sure this is nothing comparable to the stress you're going to have, but see how well that was handled. We're still here and we're still continuing.
We're still here and you're all still here. So thank you for bearing with us. But yeah, definitely like how we were saying earlier, SARA applies to schools that don't even need anatomy. But I took anatomy because I'm in kinesiology. Noor took her anatomy course because I don't know if she needed it, but she just took it. Yeah.
Sorry, I just keep your options open by taking the courses if you can. Like sorry, let me fix that. Not no one. I don't like anatomy, so I really didn't want to take it. But again, as my wise sister said, she's like, in case you decide to go to a specific school that it needs anatomy when it's summer and like you're done, do you really want to take it then, or do you want to just take it now as an elective? So keep your options open, and definitely everybody who's in high school or even second year, fourth, whatever year, right after this, go check all the schools you want to go into, make a little Google for yourself, a little Excel sheet, write down the courses that are needed for each of the schools and see when you can take them. Because Ryerson, for example, is really picky with when they offer specific courses. So we don't have them every semester. I know York is a bit open with that. They have majority both semesters. So definitely really get on top of that just to make sure that, when the time comes to apply, you have those, because some schools are very specific with the courses you need and the timeline.
Yeah, and I'll actually add those to the Excel that we're making, so you guys can start seeing most of those prereqs for this cycle that's coming for the dental schools. And because Noor is a lovely TMU student, we've also included the TMU equivalents here, so that you guys can have them. And in case you wanted to take any of these, you guys can know what Noor took.
As
Okay,
well
you
as
guys,
lots of electives and psychology courses.
but yeah, you guys can just take a screenshot of that. And now we'll move on to the next kind of, it's a half module, I guess, but it's just about taking exams and preparing for them and what that whole process is like. So we have 2 webinars on the DAT, and it overviews what the DAT is, how to study for it. It's kind of more catered towards Canadian, but I will have kind of like an additional one that will talk about the organic chem section and the quantitative reasoning section, but honestly, those 2 sections involve just a lot of practice. The 7 strategies video that we have on our YouTube channel will cover both exams. And it's definitely really important that you guys learn about what the DAT process is like through reading the guides that the ADA or the CDA puts up. But I think our speakers can come from 2 different sides of the DAT and share that experience, because Noor took Canadian and Sarah took American. And some dental schools don't accept the Canadian DAT in the USA. Or some do, but they prefer if you take an American one. No necessarily judgment, but if you took a Canadian and a US attempt, then they will probably look at your US score. But definitely staying on top of the deadlines for when to take your DAT, of course, with US schools, taking it the earlier the better. But we'll talk about that framework kind of at the end of the next module as to when the best times to do everything is. But yeah, so please share with us as to when you took it and kind of like how that process went, and if you also needed to take Casper exams along with this.
I can get started with this. So I actually took the Canadian DAT in September 2022. I was not happy with my results, and I ended up taking the American DAT again, like for a second attempt. I spoke to some students, and because of the additional sections, I felt comfortable in my math section, which actually ended up being my worst section when I took the American DAT. But I thought that was going to help my score. And I took my American DAT in July 2023. I do recommend planning to take your DAT earlier, because specifically for American schools, because the application cycle at SAS that is mentioned, I believe, on the resource list or at the end of the slides here, they open up at the end of May or early May, and you can actually submit your applications early June. So the earlier your DAT scores are in, the earlier you can apply. Some schools you can still apply to without your DAT scores, but your actual official application review for most of the schools that I personally applied to, they start whenever they receive all the prerequisites, the DAT being one. And maybe Noor can talk about the Canadian DAT and her experience with it before we jump into the Casper exam.
Sure, thanks. So the Canadian DAT, I chose to do that because I don't necessarily love math or organic chemistry. And at the time I hadn't taken the second organic chemistry. So I didn't really feel confident in risking that, because I would have to teach it all to myself basically. So I did the Canadian DAT, and as you can see, I did it in August. And I agree with what Sarah said. I think the earlier you can do it when you're prepared, the better, because the US schools are rolling basis. So first come, first serve. And if for me, it took a month to get my results. So the American one, the day of, you see your score. Canadian takes a month. So if you wait a month, see, I did it in August, meaning I basically got my results start of September, which is considered pretty late for the US cycle. And so if I were to not apply, I wouldn't have known until a month after. But if I had done it maybe earlier, I would have had much more chances at, potentially getting more interviews just because, again, first come, first serve. Yeah, all I can say is the earlier the better, and try to really plan for it and give yourself the time to not really do anything else while you're doing it. I know it's hard. Some people just can't, but if possible, try to not work, not take courses, and really, oh, my voice is low. Is this better? Sorry. Hello? Yes.
It was okay for me, but maybe
Okay.
talk a bit louder.
I'll come a bit closer. What was I saying? Oh yeah, just try to, if possible, don't take summer courses. Don't try to work don't work if you can. If you have to, of course, that's a different story. Try to really spend quality time on doing this so that you do it once and you do it properly instead of taking it a couple times, because you can get burnt out. And on top of that, it's just preferred. Why not, if you can do it once, spend your 3 months, 2 months, whatever, study it really well and get a good score, apply, and you're done, versus taking it and then maybe you're not doing too well because you think you have another shot next year, and then you just keep doing that, and then you're doing a little bit of everything, a little bit of your work, a little bit of your courses. And Shamim can speak to that, because I think she was kind of juggling some courses and stuff while she was taking the DAT. So you can talk about that, and we'll talk about the Casper.
Yeah, so I actually took my DAT last year after I finished my 4th year, and I was taking 2 summer courses at the same time. And honestly, it was a cycle of procrastinating courses, studying for the DAT, but then afterwards procrastinating DAT and studying for my courses. So honestly, at some point, like within my studying, I was supposed to do it July 10th, but then I even pushed it back a month to August because I was like, oh, I don't have time to study with my courses and stuff. But honestly, like in the middle of studying, I was just like, it doesn't make sense. I honestly am going to be applying late. It's not going to be a strong score. So I made that executive decision to not waste my money on applications, because my application would have been going in really late. So it's kind of like a financial decision I made for myself, but ultimately I had to be okay with taking a gap year after I finished school. So I know somebody asked in the chat, like, if it's better if they took like the DAT the summer before their 4th year, and then they finished up their prereqs and then they applied like afterwards. Honestly, your score is only valid for like a certain amount of time. Some schools only accept it for 2 years. Some schools accept it for 3 years. It really just depends. But the best way to go about it is, once you're ready and you have that score, try to have it ready before May, or around May, even June, of the cycle that you're going to be applying to. The cycle opens very early June, and they always say the earlier you submit, the better, because it takes weeks for verification. And as well, when you take your DAT, it takes weeks for verification as well. So it's just always good to try to prepare and aim for that beforehand. But I know all of us kind of have been just doing it in the middle of summer because that's when we have time. And I've spoken to some admissions advisors, and they say as long as your DAT is being done before August, that's usually preferred. Noor is an example of how that's maybe not necessarily true for all schools, but generally that is a rule of thumb that I've heard a lot. But yeah, you guys can talk about Casper now.
Okay, I can start. And also, sorry, just to add on, I originally was going to do my DAT closer to Sarah's. I actually pushed mine back because I didn't feel ready. So that's an option for everybody. Don't feel like you have to do it the day you get it. Yes, you have to pay a little bit of a fee as soon as it's closer to, then I think it's like 90 days, 60 days, 30 days, something like that. But it's worth it, because if you're not ready, those maybe 2-3 weeks can make a huge difference. You're practicing more, you can do more repetition. So again, like me, don't worry about it. You can always extend it a little bit and do it when you're comfortable. Okay, as for the Casper, and also, sorry, last thing, me and Sarah actually studied for the DAT basically together. We started around the same time and almost finished at the same time. And that was nice because of one, if you have a friend who's also dedicated to doing something, it's nice to, you guys have a schedule together. You guys can kind of push each other and also keep each other on track. So I definitely recommend having a study buddy if possible. Now for the Casper, me and Sarah both got fourth quartile, if I'm correct. We both did the Canadian and the American. Not too many schools in the US needed. I think if I'm correct, Detroit, I remember needed it. But none of the ones that I got into actually needed it. Dalhousie in Canada needs it. Majority, I think, in Canada need it. The format of the Canadian and US one, I mean American one, are identical. Same thing. You just have to do them for some reason twice. And it's situation based, and there's so many YouTube videos, and you kind of just have to know what to say, which is my honest opinion, because I think it's not necessarily the best way to assess a person, but it is what it is. And I think it helps. For example, I know in Western is situational based the interview, so it could be basically practice for that. But almost all of the interviews I did, except the first part of USC, which was a Kira interview, which was online. None of them were situation based. So that just goes to show that majority of the schools that asked for it didn't accept me, didn't give me an interview, or didn't need it. So I'll give it to you, Sarah. You're mute.
Again, muted. I took my Casper, I believe, like a week or two after my DAT. I did need it for some of the US dental schools that I was applying to. I believe Temple needed a Casper. And there were, I think, 2, 3 other schools on there. Not many out of the list of schools that I applied to. And I just used YouTube resources. I believe Noor and I were actually sharing all the resources that we were finding online together. Not very specific preparation in terms of like not a specific resource, but definitely converse with as many people that have taken the test for tips on how to, something as simple as how to speed up your typing, because I think it was an important aspect of it. And really get yourself familiarized with all the different situational questions that could possibly be asked. You're definitely going to get new situations on the exam. But one thing for sure is true, and that is the way you can think about answering the question. So practice as much as you can through all the available resources that you can find. And in regards to sharing a community for your DAT, for your Casper, I think this is why the Bright Future Dentist Club is what it is. But really, it makes a lot of difference, because when you're spending your summer studying for the DAT, and if you're friends with someone who's not and they're on vacation, it really feels difficult. So share that time with people who are on the same journey. You learn a lot together, and you share a lot of information that you've gathered from very different resources, and bring it together to help you prepare for anything that's ahead of you. That's that. Yeah, I think this was talked about briefly. Noor and I started together and did the exam pretty close together as well. And we both took 2.5 months to study for the exam. I personally, as well as Noor, I had taken the Canadian DAT the year before that. I am sure that had impacted the way I was studying. And also Noor took the MCAT the year before that. So I was going to add this about the American DAT. One of the reasons I took it was that I was taking organic chemistry just before my DAT. So it was a familiar concept, and I think that really helped me. So even if it comes to planning your courses in a way where the courses and the content that's on the DAT, you can take the courses closer to the DAT, that is very, very useful as well. If that's an option, go for it for sure.
Yeah. Sorry, just to add on. Sorry about that. She's right. I forgot to mention I did do the MCAT because I said I had a little year of I don't know if I want to do dentistry or not. And I will say the amount that I studied, I still did 2.5 months, and I don't think I recommend anything less for a minimum. And that was majority because I think the material was so similar. If anything, the MCAT is much harder than the DAT. So in the very back of my head, I still had some stuff I remembered from the MCAT. So I was able to kind of skip a bunch of stuff. And also the material is kind of different in the sense that the DAT isn't application based. You kind of know it or you don't. So give yourself enough time to be able to do repetition. Again, I extended a little bit because I thought I needed a couple weeks of doing extra chemistry problems, doing extra, I used Anki for some things, I used, flashcards, whatever. Repetition is key for the DAT, especially for the bio section, and practice is key for everything else, like the PAT and chemistry.
I think we talked about this, no?
Yeah.
I actually used the DAT Booster platform, which was recommended for the American DAT. It is an American resource. I know people that also use that to write the Canadian DAT. The content in both exams, as someone who has written both, overlaps quite a lot. It's just, I think one difference that I noticed other than the sections that are absent in the American DAT is the way some of the questions are structured. So it actually might have been useful to study with a Canadian resource for the Canadian DAT. Maybe that would have been more helpful in regards to getting familiar with the structure of questions. But overall, I think the content, I think both really work. Both resources work for both examinations, and it's just a matter of they definitely cost. They have different costs. They have different programs, and whatever is more user friendly to you.
And I highly recommend Chad's prep for chemistry and organic chemistry because that saved my life. It took my score up maybe literally by 4 in the last 3 weeks. No exaggeration.
That's amazing. Thank you both. Definitely, if you have any more questions about anything we discussed over the past few modules, just drop them in the chat and we'll continue answering them throughout, but we'll definitely read over everything in Q&A. So now talking about timeline plus experience, when to do it all, what is involved for your resume, your letters of recommendation, personal statement, all that good stuff. So there are 6 important factors when it comes to your application on ADSAS. There's a portal that's called ADEA, ADSAS, which is what you apply through. I used to call it ADIA, but then I heard other people calling it ADEA, and I'm like, oh, okay, that sounds nicer. But yeah, so pretty much there's different components such as reference letters from your professors, research and involvement in extracurriculars or you're volunteering, shadowing experience, especially, and job experience. So journaling everything that you go through, as well as your shadowing, marking down dates and hours and what you learned throughout your undergrad as you're doing these things is such a key tip. And it honestly makes things very useful at the end when you're kind of trying to reminisce over like, okay, when did I do this? Like, how long did I do this for and everything? So it'll honestly just save you time with filling that out because filling out that application really does take time. You have to write about each and every single one of your experiences, and even how you write it is very important because you don't want it to sound dull. Like you could honestly say shadowing like, oh, I was in the room next to Dr. So-and-so and I watched them treat patients throughout the day. That's a very like general 1-sentence thing you could say, but there's such a better way that you could say that too. So definitely like kind of thinking about the best way to write those experiences down earlier can help you when you're reviewing that later on. And then that way you can just have somebody read it over and you save lots of time. Yeah, so I'll pass it off to either Noor or Sarah to start going over these things. And we're each gonna give you guys different like experiences and things of what we've learned over the years. Each of us have gone through 5 years of university, so a wealth of advice and knowledge to share with you, but drop your questions in the chat if you have anything throughout.
I can get started with this. So most of the schools that I was applying to, and I'm not sure if this was the case for all schools, they required 2 science professors, recommendation letters from 2 science professors, and 1 from a dentist, possibly also 1 from a social science humanities. I am not 100% sure if that applied to all schools. I did put all of these on the ADSAS platform to meet all the other requirements. I actually had difficulty getting my reference letters because I was a psych major. So I didn't take a lot of science courses. And so I had a limited number of people that I could reach out to. plan this early on. Connect with your professors. This is important. I know people that get stuck at this stage and they have everything else prepared for dental school, but just because they don't have the reference letters, they can't sort of apply, at least in the first year. That might even lead them to taking an extra year or doing research just because they need a reference letter. And be genuine in your connections. I will give an example of someone who wrote a recommendation letter for me, a science professor. I had my class over Zoom, so I didn't have the chance to connect with them as much as I would probably in person. And I, in fact, didn't connect with them through the classroom setting. I did not really love the course. It was a difficult course. This was an organic chemistry course. I barely got myself through that course. But I did realize that this professor had an interest in the arts. And so we found that in common. I was hosting the amalgamation art exhibition, and I invited them to the exhibition. That sort of kickstarted our connection. So we ended up speaking about other things, and in a personal statement, just imagine that they have to write a one-page letter for you and about you. So they need to know you, and they don't need to know what grade you got in their course or how you study necessarily. That's also a portion of it, academic success, but they can still write about you if they know you. So start these connections, and I'll pass it on to Noor if she has anything additional to add, and also in her approach as to how she got her recommendation letters.
Yeah, thanks. I agree. I originally, just a little story of like what can happen. When I was applying, I originally had talked to one of the professors that I did a bit of research with, and she was like, "Yeah, I'd love to like write you on." She ended up getting pregnant, and so she was taking a bunch of time off, and she basically just like was not replying to my emails, even though she agreed. So, they're human too, things happen. So she basically never ended up writing me one. I had to reach out to different people that I didn't necessarily know as well. So one of them was like a super random professor. I don't know what, and again, you don't know what they write for you, right? So if you're approaching them in like a like just be aware of how you're emailing people, how you're treating people, how you're talking to people, because they can make or break your application basically, because they can say anything they want to say. If they don't know you or they do know you and they, saw you doing this in class once or whatever, they can mention that. They can say this person's not organized, this person's not this. And it could even be about your grades, who knows. But yeah, just make genuine connections, and definitely be very early with when you want to say anything. Preface it at the very start, just saying, "Hey, I'm this person." Make yourself known. I know after COVID and a lot of people who started school in COVID, it's really hard for everyone to reach out, but it's okay to be rejected. Me, Sarah, Shamim, we are very familiar with getting rejected, sending a bunch of emails. I know for research, I reached out to so many people. They rejected me. Reference letters too. I had reached out to, I think, 6 or 7 profs saying, "Hey, I'm a student from this class." And because I was in COVID, I was like having my school during COVID, it was even harder because they didn't necessarily recognize me. I didn't turn on my camera. They didn't know who I was. So, leave some space. I say do it as early as possible. If you have a course in September, start in September. Do it in Christmas. Give them a little happy Christmas message. Just, keep reminding them and give them time. They're still busy. So yeah, couple months.
Moral of the story, turn your cameras on. It's good. It's important. People see your faces, they connect to you. And again, that's only if you feel comfortable. But it's definitely a big thing. Like I remember online courses as well, and I have a habit of turning my camera on. And I remember there were courses where my professor would say, "Can you turn off your camera? Like you're the only person." But that helped, that conversation and them remembering your face after 2 years when you want to walk into their office and have a little chat with them in order to ask for a recommendation letter. At the least, they remember your face. And that's already a bonus when you're in a class of 200 with cameras that are all shut off.
Yeah, so definitely, guys, something that Noor said, which was really nice, is messaging them like happy holidays, or even at the end of your course, like, "Hey, thank you so much for this course. Like I really enjoyed it with you." And you don't have to say anything like, "Sorry, I wasn't that involved. Sorry, I wasn't a part of discussion that much," but just show your genuine appreciation and gratitude for the professor. And if you take multiple classes with a professor, that's an even bigger bonus because they might see your name on their class list a little bit more frequently. And if you are consistently emailing them like, "Hey, this is my second course with you. thank you so much. It's really nice. And Sarah always like brings up like they're human too. So getting that appreciation from students like is really meaningful for them. But I have a typo on this, but it's safe to have two science profs, which is what they like want from you, and they're academic. So typically, like it's somebody who you took a course with and who can vouch for your academic abilities. And hopefully, in that course, you got either an A or an A plus in it. But you also need one letter of reference from a dentist as well. So shadowing people and kind of building a connection with that dentist will help you a lot. I know in some letters of recommendations from the dentist, some dentists write how many hours the student shadowed. So make sure you guys are on the same page with the dentist about how they're going to be showing you guys towards the universities. As well for the American schools as well. I know a lot of students, they send a CV to their letters of reference professors and they're like, hey, like I'm also involved in all of these things. And that can help the professor kind of think of qualities and how to describe you, what adjectives to use in that letter. And all of that makes the process easier for them. And somebody asked in the chat, like, do you write the letter and have them look over it? Honestly, usually no, like depending on many professors, like they don't do that. I don't know whose mic is okay. There we go. Usually they don't do that. You're supposed to send them this link that actually, no, sorry. You put their email on the AdSAS portal, they send them that link and they're supposed to upload that letter there. Some schools use a platform called Interfolio, which is a way to securely receive letters of recommendations from even before you apply. However, I need to preface this. For the year you are applying, that letter of recommendation has to be for that current year. So you cannot resubmit a letter of recommendation from the previous year, and make sure the dates are correct on the letter that your professor is submitting. So it's important to consistently follow up and, like Noor says, have grit in this process. The last thing I wanted to say is, for very specific schools, not all schools, if you are reapplying to that school on a second cycle, they will actually require another letter of recommendation apart from the ones you're already submitting. So you could have two science profs and they'll be like, yeah, you need one more now because you're reapplying. Don't know why, but I know there are some schools that are like that. And the last one is kind of like a non-science, and that can be, for example, like your research supervisor, your manager, your coach, somebody that was maybe like a representative at the place you volunteered at, maybe somebody at the like dental office you worked at that's like maybe not a dentist or like a manager or something. It just depends on like your experience and your profile. But if you have any more
Jump in to answer some of the questions that were dropped in the chat in regards to the timeline. So again, you can apply to schools without the prerequisites sometimes. Like let's say your DAT scores are not in. Your application might not be reviewed though, depending again on a school to school basis. From what I understand and from what I remember, recommendation letters are not like that. So you need the recommendation letters submitted to AdSAS before you can even click the submit button. So the earlier you have the professor notified, first of all, consider that they are busy and they need to have time to write this. And second of all, that when by the time they uploaded, then you can have your application ready to submit. I know someone mentioned if you have a gap year, you can still keep in touch with your professors, and that's something I had a gap year I recommend doing. So the two science professors, one of the science professors and then my humanities course that wrote me recommendation letters, I was in touch with them all throughout the year. Not always, but just as Noor and Shami mentioned, a Christmas message, a New Year message, whatever they celebrate. And remember that when they write, if you might end up applying for 2 cycles, if they write your application or your recommendation letter once, still thank them, still send them the emails. You never know. And this should come from a genuine point of view, but also you never know if you're going to need them again or not. So just remember, don't just drop them because now they've written it for you. Next year, you might need it again. Hopefully you won't, but that's a connection, that's a lifelong connection that you can go back to. You might even be applying to later for jobs and they might be able to write recommendation letters for you. So that's that for a gap year.
last one to note, sorry, the slide is getting a little long, but it's a very important part of your application, and that's committee letters. So I'm not sure if anybody on this chat is a US student, but generally Canadian students, we don't really have that. Like, we don't have pre-health committees at our universities. There's pre-health clubs, but they're not professors or actual official pre-health advisors at our universities. And what a committee letter is that an American university that has a pre-health committee, which is dedicated to helping students obtain graduate like studies and help them along that journey, they are kind of, what's the word, like eligible to write you a letter based on all of your qualities and like everything great about you in one letter. And that will kind of substitute your 2 science professor letters that you need. So you can have a community letter if you have that at your university. Canadian ones don't, unfortunately. And then along with that, you just need a dentist letter of recommendation and your non-science. So I know a lot of people get confused about that, but that's kind of generally how to answer that question. Okay, now let's talk about research, because I know so many people think that for pre-med and pre-dental, this is such an important like factor that's a part of your dental school application, but it's not necessarily the thing that's going to set you apart from everybody, and it's not always a requirement. It's just something that's a really great experience to add on to your profile if that's something that you were able to obtain. So I remember that Sormia was kind of sharing that, for example, having 9 months of laboratory experience or X amount of time of laboratory experience / research in a different field can make you a competitive applicant and more ready for dental school. And that is a little bit true, like, especially if you are in kind of like a sciencey field, it kind of gets you into that headspace. But for example, I've done research before. I did a year being a research assistant at a global health lab here at York, and it was kind of a work study position. So I was getting a little bit of money while I was in it as well. But it wasn't necessarily like a laboratory research position. It was about global health, and it was about kind of like climate change and everything. And it was about climate change and kind of like addressing wellness and feelings and kind of finding evidence-based reports and articles to support like what our mission was. And I also did an independent study with one of my kinesiology professors, which was also not a sciencey topic at all, and it was on anti-trafficking in the Olympic Games. So more like sociological and like legal, that was like related to sports, which is what I did my other research on. So it's great to have research, and there's ways to go about it, and it can be useful that when you're applying to research positions throughout your dental school program, it can help you out and you have that previous experience, especially if you're involved in a lab that is trying to publish articles. Oftentimes, professors will give you tasks and responsibilities for the paper that they're trying to publish, or for example, grants that they're trying to receive, and they will include your name along with that. But not always, not something that every lab does or every supervisor does. So it's definitely not something to get your hopes up for. A published article is not something that dental schools are gonna like want you to have when you're applying, because it's very rare for you to get one, and especially at an undergrad level. But it's good to gain skills in statistical analysis, because many forms of research methods kind of involve finding data, gathering data, and like how you're going to be organizing that. There are different alternatives, though, that if you don't kind of get hired at a lab or obtain a volunteer position within a lab, you can do an honors thesis. That one is still related to working in a lab, but some students do an honors thesis independently with their professors on a topic. And an honors thesis is something that you're then going to have to defend. So you write a long paper about something that you're like doing an independent research study on, and then afterwards you'll be kind of defending that to your panel. Or you can do something called an independent research study, which is what I did. And how that works is you meet with you meet with a professor, you agree on a topic, and usually it's something along the lines of research that they already want to do. And you kind of go about independently working on that, meeting deadlines, and they'll come up with a way to evaluate you. And for each of these, you have to submit an application to your faculty to be able to be approved for it. So if anyone has any more questions about that, make sure you reach out to me. And as well, more resources on research is posted on a webinar on our YouTube channel, with as well as a link in the resource link I sent earlier on kind of like how to get into research and the template for it.
Just to add on to the research, as I mentioned, basically did my half of my first year and all of my second year and a bit of my third year in COVID. So it's really hard to get research because I couldn't really go in person. And again, where it comes to having grit, I probably emailed around 20 profs from everywhere, U of T, not York, U of T and Ryerson, asking for research online, anything I could do. And at the time, the restrictions were very strict, so I couldn't really do anything. But I ended up being accepted into a research practicum for the spring semester, and so that was around 2-3 months of doing a lot of online stuff, counting cells. And that's basically all the research I had because I literally couldn't find anything else at the time. And then afterwards, every summer, I was doing my MCAT or DAT, so I didn't really want to spend time doing research. I know a lot of people say that they really care about research. I think it's mixed. Some people in the chat were saying, like, is it okay if it's not necessarily science-based? And as me and Sarah both said, any research is good research. It shows that you still care about whatever it is you care about and that you're human. You know, not everybody who's applying to dentistry is only gonna specifically like sciences. I think in general it's nice to have research because it's some hands-on knowledge potentially you get to learn more. But if not, that's totally fine. But yeah, definitely apply. What I did, I Googled the directory of U of D, and I literally went and searched every single prof and what their research was. And then if I liked it, I would email them. I had a little template saying like, hey, I read this and I thought this was interesting. I'd love to either meet in person or have a Zoom with you to see if it's possible to do research. And of those, almost all of them were like, hey, we're not accepting anybody now, but we'll keep you in mind. So that's just a tip for you guys.
I'll add, and this applies to research, to work, to shadowing. Someone was asking, is it enough to shadow one dentist? I think just remember at the end of the day, when you walk into your interview, if there's things to talk about, that's a good thing. So if you shadow 3 different dentists with 3 different personalities, with 3 different specialties, that just gives you more insight into the industry. And so whenever they ask you a question, I remember Temple asked me a question of name 5 different dental instruments. And if I had only shadowed one dentist, a GP, I might have not been able to access the names of all these different instruments as easily. Same goes for research. So just remember that someone was asking, the last question, how recent does the research have to be in terms of the application process? Again, remember that like the details of the research position, I think, is only important in regards to how you're going to approach it and how you're going to use it to present yourself. I personally don't think they actually go through every single detail of which research did which applicant take, but how did they use it? How are they using the things that they learned in order to set them off to dental school? So just keep that in mind as you do anything, the courses you take, the part-time work you do. Everything's important, I think. Whatever you do, it's important, and really make it count and make it important.
Thank you both. Yeah, if you have any more questions about that, just drop them and we'll cover it in Q&A. But let's go over volunteer experience now, because volunteerism is valued in all dental schools because it also shows that you really care about your community. But what's kind of like the difference between community service volunteering and other forms of volunteering? Because honestly, when you're an undergrad, you're not very much like doing extracurriculars that all pay you. So I'll have our speakers share their knowledge about that.
Sorry, I'm just pulling up my resume to see what I did because I also forget. So in terms of volunteering, I think it kind of started naturally for me doing random stuff in high school even. So for example, I volunteered at a nonprofit called Tirgan. Maybe you guys know of it. It's a Farsi nonprofit. And that was actually online. I was doing some research for their marketing team. And I included that. And I will also add on AdSAS even, it'll tell you to highlight 5, I think, volunteer experiences and also shadowing experiences that you think is relevant. So definitely as you're writing things or highlighting things in your personal statement, make note of the things that you want to speak about the most or you want it to stand out the most, to talk about those the most. So if you did something in, let's say, high school and you're finishing your 5th year now, it's probably more relevant to talk about the stuff you did your 4th year, 5th year, or 3rd year rather than something you did in high school, unless it's something, you know, that you really, really want to mention. So for volunteering, I did a bunch of shadowing that they sort of count as volunteering. I was a sports coach at some point. I did co-op, which sort of counts as volunteering slash work. I did co-op in the dental department in Sunnybrook Hospital. And I talked about that in my interviews as well, because it was with people who had disabilities and people who were veterans. On top of that, some of the work I did started as volunteering. So I actually worked at a continuing education office for a little bit. But before I started working there, I was volunteering, going to the events, kind of seeing what's happening. And that's a really good way to actually get your foot in the door, message the people or the companies you're interested in working with, and kind of say, hey, I'm really interested. Is there any volunteer positions for me to kind of understand, you know, how things work, or to get a bit of a better sense. And yeah, hospitals and everything, they're also great things to work at or volunteer at, except again, because of COVID, my specific restrictions were very big. And so they weren't allowing just anybody to come volunteer. It was very tight. But yeah, everyone in dental school, because it's a very service-based job, sorry, they want to make sure that you like to give service, you want to give back to the community. So definitely try to make sure you do a bunch of volunteer experiences, because they will ask you about it on all the interviews basically. And if they don't ask about it directly, they will ask about it indirectly through things you learned in an experience, or things that you encounter that you didn't like in an experience, stuff like that. And then that's your time to shine and kind of mention all the stuff you did, so they know that you're a good fit. That's all.
I'm not going to add much to the volunteer experience. But Shamim, if we're going to head to extracurriculars.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. Yeah, we can go on. Somebody asked like how many hours of volunteering do you have? And like I would say this is kind of like subjective. I remember like reading so many pre-dental forums, and they're all like, I have 500 plus volunteer hours. And I used to be like, wow, that is so much. And then I realized, I was like, well, if you were in a club from the start of September until the end of April, that's kind of a lot of hours. Like they kind of consider like the timeline of things you're involved in more so than the number of hours of things. But I know depending on the school, they asked like, what was your commitment like? Like how many hours per week on average, like were you involved? And that's kind of something they more look at. So generally school clubs are like 2 hours per week, or like 5 hours per week of like commitment that they look for. So kind of keeping that stuff tracked down. I know a lot of people also inflate the amount of work that they do on their applications too. So that's something for you to consider if that's something you want to like kind of include. I'm not necessarily suggesting you inflate your experiences, but if it's something that you're going to be discussing, make sure it kind of matches on to the number of hours you committed to that, or the timeline of something you committed to. So obviously, I think if they're going to see you were in a club for 3 years, maybe that's something significant that you potentially should have achieved while being in that club, or what can you share regarding your experience being in that club, what teamwork or collaboration, and so on. But if you have more questions, ask us later. Yeah, and extracurriculars. Sorry to take it on.
Yeah, the reason I didn't want to add to volunteer work is that I know Noor covered it all, and that there's certain volunteer positions like getting involved with clubs or communities. And when I say volunteer, I'm just mentioning that it's not like you're an employer there, so you're not getting paid for it, but it's still considered extracurricular activity. So for me, I was part of I was actually among the first, I think, founding members, if that's the title of the Bright Future Dentist Club. And in the second year, I was promoted to a new position, and even after I graduated, I'm still in touch with Bright Future Dentist. I try my best. 2 weeks ago, I attended a seminar on how Noor and I actually both attended a seminar on how to write the DAT, even when we had already written it, because I think getting involved with clubs is that valuable. You find your community, and I think I'm a people person. I think I care to spend time with a lot of people. But if I were to pick one specific community, if I had limited energy to spend with people, it would have been in extracurriculars that are related to pre-dentals or to dental school. Because I think the things you learn from these experiences is just, you can't learn as you sit home on your own, even if you're reading a book or watching webinars. So it's good to get involved from from just getting started with watching webinars. But then definitely reach out to Shamim, reach out in the group chat for opportunities. Ask people when it comes to shadowing, how did they find their shadowing opportunities? And this really allows you to navigate the entire pre-dental process. I also do a lot of I have a lot of hobbies. So I play the piano, I sing. I know Noor, she put the handle of her cooking page for her Instagram cooking page. But she's turned her hobby into something more serious. She does it in a more structured way. And I recommend you do that because it helps you with all these extracurricular experiences. It helps you with balancing your academics and your community work. And also I did sports at university. So I've played badminton for all my life, and I played on the York team and competed for championships. So if there's any sport that you do, and even if you don't, I know there's intramurals at York specifically that you can get involved in, even if you're not a professional in a sport. And yeah, I think clubs, get involved with clubs. I was part of the Women's Mental Health Talks club as well. I was a part of the Sexual Center for Violence or Center for Sexual Violence and Responses at York. And I also, what else did I do? I turned my hobbies and monetized them at times, and that was some of the extracurriculars that I did. So I always had an interest in the art industry and the dental industry. I put them together. And that was another extracurricular that I created the opportunity with the help of other people for myself. So you don't always even need to rely on other third-party institutions in order to find these opportunities. Sometimes, just as Noor did with her cooking, you can even come up with your own opportunities, which I highly, highly recommend, because that can set you apart. Again, not that it'll set you apart completely, but it can give you something to talk about. And yeah, that's it.
Sorry, just to add on, I think extracurriculars and volunteering is the best time to venture out and see like what you like to do. So like Sarah, through her extracurriculars, kind of explored the arts a little bit more. Me, I explored my cooking a little bit more. And in the interviews that you do or in your personal statement, these are the things that are going to stick out, and these are the things that are going to keep you memorable in someone's head, because everyone's going to have a GPA, everyone's going to have shadowing, everyone's going to have research probably. But the extracurriculars and the volunteering you do can be unique because they can be really related and niche, and you can be super passionate about it, or it can be super not related, and it could be something that you're exploring in whatever field it is. So definitely try to don't follow the same path as everybody else, as everyone's doing, I don't know, hospital, everyone's doing, just the usuals. Try to go out of your comfort zone. If you like rock climbing, if you like pottery, and sure, if it has manual dexterity, then even better. But if not, you're learning something new by yourself.
Definitely, definitely.
Everything they said, I attest to that. Definitely when it comes to extracurriculars, it needs to be unique to you. And pre-dental clubs is a great way to showcase to a dental school like how much you've been committed to wanting to go into dentistry, especially if you hold a leadership role in that. Any leadership roles can really show a valuable statement towards all dental schools that you're applying to. But as well, like starting your own club, or even at York University, you can start an Agents of Change. And with an Agents of Change in your club, the universities give you some funding so you can host events and you can kind of do that. There's like an application process that like it goes along with it, but I know at York University, they have a lot of events where they show you exactly how to go through it, and they help you, and they kind of make it seem as easy as possible. But of course, like hosting events in your own university or shadowing as well, volunteering at hospitals, if that's something you're into, it just, at the end of the day, it has to be something you want to do. Like it can't be something you're doing for writing it on your profile, because ultimately, when they're going to ask you something about it, or if they're going to ask you a question, then you need to bring it up somehow. Like, why would you bring up something that you didn't really enjoy doing? It's just not going to sound nice to the person that's listening to you talk. And I'm sure you guys know that when you're having a normal conversation with one of your friends or something, and they're talking about something that they don't like doing, you can always tell. So it's really important to note those things down. But yeah. So where to find extracurricular activities. I think Noor kind of went over this a bit, so did Sara. But definitely you can just always go on Google, and Google will be your best friend throughout undergrad for everything. Maybe even try using ChatGPT to give you ideas. But there's so many opportunities. But if you guys need more help with finding these things, you can always message me in our WhatsApp group chat or even message us on Instagram, and we can try to help you more a little one-on-one. So shadowing, Noor and Sara both have really great shadowing experience. So I would love for them to share that here. And of course, how important that is in your application.
I can start. Sorry, you're still on mute if you wanted to start. But shadowing, as Sarah mentioned, is really important because you are going in the field, so they expect you to have a decent amount of knowledge about the field you're going into, which is normal. It's going to be your career for the rest of your life. So shadowing is a good way for both them and you to kind of assess if this is really what you want to do. So I shadowed at a couple different places. I did a general dentist. I did two general dentists, and then I did one endo and one perio. They were both in the same clinic, so it was nice because I could just go around whoever had patients. And as I mentioned to someone else in the chat, in terms of shadowing, it's really nice if you could just go in person if you don't know how to get shadowing experience. Go to your own dental clinic or somewhere that you know. Go in person, say that I'm going into dental school, I want to apply, and I'd love to shadow. Be respectful. Be nice and be open if they say no, then it is what it is. But usually they're okay with it. And I had around, okay, I can't recall the amount of numbers. I think I said it on the chat, and then now I forgot. I don't want to say the wrong number, but I'll double check.
200 on the chat.
Okay, yeah, I had around 200. Give or take a couple up and down. The thing is with writing on the on AdSAS, I didn't remember the exact hours I had. So a tip is to write down the exact dates and hours that you do the shadowing. Because sometimes I'd go to even the volunteering too, because I'd just go and then I'd forget and then I just didn't know. So when putting it on the AdSAS platform, again, like Shamim said, it has to match with what the people are going to say if they need to confirm it or if they need to write you a letter of recommendation. So that's really important. And yeah, they need to know that you know what's up about the field. If they ask you questions about what's your favorite, like what you said, the favorite instrument. They just need to know that you've done your research, you're going to be a dentist, hopefully. And yeah, it's a good way to see the lifestyle, the everyday life of a dentist. You can ask questions, you can gain some knowledge. Yeah, that's it. Sarah?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough because I was working at, which I'll get into in the next couple of slides, but I was working at a dental office as a receptionist. And so every day after work, I spent an hour, during my breaks, an hour later shadowing. So I kind of mixed the two together. When I had capacity, also when front was less busy, I would go to the back and I would shadow. So I had around, I think, 400, 500 shadowing hours. I was working at an office of a general practitioner. However, there were specialists that were coming into that office. So I got also, again, I was lucky enough to get the opportunity of shadowing 4 different dentists. So I did endodontics, oral surgery, perio, one perio specifically with gum disease and one perio specifically with implants, and then the GP. One time I decided that I want to step out of that office and maybe shadow other offices to see if there's anything that I can learn from different offices. And I went to an endodontic specialist only office. And that day, I remember how different that experience was walking into the sterilization room, and all the equipments in the sterilization room was endo related. I saw a microscope that we actually saw in our campus tour last week with Noor, a microscope that costs more than hundreds of thousands of dollars in that office that I had never come across before. So really the response that I gave to a student that asked if it's okay to shadow one dentist, yes, of course it's okay. But in regards to the different cases that you're going to run into, again, at the endodontic specialist only office, I ran into a case of a patient that had broken file in the root canal, in the root after they had a root canal, and they had gone to 3 different dentists to try to save their tooth. None of the GPs were able to do that for them. So they ended up coming to a specialist only office. And so the reason I'm giving you all these details is that these details are different based on what specialist you're shadowing, and also based on what office you're going into. And I really recommend, it's very valuable to gain exposure as to how you can approach your career. And it also definitely gives you insight into whether you want to specialize later, whether there's something in dentistry that you are like leaning more towards to. So again, use that opportunity. In regards to finding dental offices to shadow, I know some students have a hard time doing this because of barriers when you email them. I was a receptionist. We got some emails, and at times when I was busy, I wouldn't even bother opening those emails. And I'm not saying this to discourage you. In fact, I'm saying this to encourage you to follow up. Always, always, always. If there was an email that had 3 follow-ups on it, I would definitely show that email to the dentist and ask if we could invite a student in for shadowing hours. And sometimes even walk in person. If there's a local office close to your home, walk in person and see if they take on shadowing students. And make sure you're flexible with your dates, at least to start with. Make sure you're flexible with if they ask you to like stay in a corner of the room to start with and then slowly get closer. Just again, as Noor said, be respectful in your shadowing sessions, and ask your friends that are shadowing how they got into the dental office that you're shadowing at, and possibly even join them. So there's lots of different ways you can tackle this problem.
Nice, thank you. Yeah, so moving on in terms of job experience, working different jobs can like gain and improve your critical thinking and problem solving skills, professionalism, ethics, and different practical experiences, especially teamwork and collaboration. And I know working in even like foods or retail industries, you kind of get that idea of like how it really is to like work through shifts, scheduling conflicts, and those are things that actually come up in working in a dental office too, and kind of being a good team member and helping one another out. So it really shows that you're well-rounded and that you had the determination to apply to a job, go through like the interview process for like whatever that was, and like get it. And it provides students with the opportunity to learn from experienced professionals and just apply different knowledge into real world situations. I know for many different like interview questions, they ask you like practical based questions where I think if you work in like a customer service oriented field or job can really help you answer that. And especially also like for Casper, like they ask you like more like ethical based like application questions. So if you've already had like kind of like job experience, it's just such a huge bonus for that. But I'll have Sarah share more about her experience, and if anybody's interested, I can share more about mine after her.
I worked a lot. So I've been working since I was eligible to be working. I started work when I was like 16 and a half years old as a cashier at a supermarket. I just walked in and said if they're hiring, they hired me the next day without even reviewing a resume, which I didn't have at the time because I had not done anything in life. And then I applied as a barista to a local coffee shop. And as Shamim said, I think these experiences were just as valuable as me working at a dental office. It gave me insight into interpersonal connections and skills and how to speak to people, how to make them feel comfortable, and obviously the specific skills that I also learned doing these jobs. Later, this was during COVID, and healthcare professionals were the only industries that were still operating. So I actually had the chance to work at a dental office. Working at a dental office, a lot of times you need training in the software that's being used because it's not the most straightforward, or I guess you can't just walk in and get started the next day. However, your shadowing might lead you to getting work experience opportunities as a receptionist, for example, or as an assistant. So definitely try to get that experience as well if it's something that's accessible to you. After that, after 2 years of working at a dental office, I realized, you know what, I've had enough of this. I think I saw what I had to see from here. And I had the opportunity to work at a dental publishing company. So in that work environment, I approached dentists in a very, very different environment, in a very different context that I normally would at a dental office, which was also very interesting. And then during my gap year, and for anyone who's taking gap years, I think this is a very, very good opportunity to work. I think if you've already done your DAT and if you have nothing else to do, why not work? You can have some income, but also the experience that you gain out of that work is very valuable. So in my gap year, I've been working at an industry that has nothing to do with dentistry. I work at Wealthsimple, for any of you that you know, is a finance and technology corporation. It has nothing to do with dentistry, but I tell Shamim all the time, the things that I learned at a pre-dental club, the things that I know I will use as a dentist, I'm still learning at Wealthsimple as well. I also knew that I probably wouldn't get the chance to work in an industry that is not dentistry after I graduate. Time is limited, and I think after spending 4 years at a dental school, I probably want to practice at a dental office as well. So I knew that was my opportunity to get to know people, get to know different people within a society in order to navigate the problems that I can face during my work as a dentist as well. So this is really, really valuable. It has been very valuable to me. I think it's, if I were to summarize my dental school application, when I go to interviews, when I write my personal statement, it's always about the different things that I've done. So if that's something you're interested in, that's an option. If you want to focus on something specific or working somewhere for a longer period of time, these are also all recommended. And yeah, work can be fun.
Also, just to add on, I think of you two, I'm an example of someone who probably worked the least. But even in my working the least, I found myself some jobs. Like I did tutoring for a couple years. But that finished in first year. But that was cool, you know, spoke with a lot of students and taught English, math, and science. Did a lot of homework checking and all that. And then I also, again, worked at the continuing educational office, which ended up being dentistry related, which was great. So I was helping with setting up seminars, editing papers, getting people's signatures out, all that. And yeah, any work experience is good work experience just because as students, I feel like we're very in our bubbles, our university bubbles of like library studying, da da da. So you need those interpersonal experiences and the intrapersonal experiences too within communities. So it's always good to reach out and like Sarah said, if not now, then when?
Thank you both. I think that covers everything for jobs. Ultimately, now we went through kind of all those really important sections. You're trying to gain strong academic performance. You don't want any of these to deter you from your courses and your grades because your school is what comes first. You're trying to gain interpersonal skills, critical thinking and problem solving, professionalism, ethics, practical experience, and a bonus would be manual dexterity and spatial judgment. I'm always jealous of girls who do nails like right now, and that's kind of like their little part-time side hobby because they're so good at like using their fingers like on fine things, and just kind of like tuning those manual dexterity skills is honestly such a big bonus for them. But yeah, this is just kind of a guide for all of these, and you want all of these represented on your application to the best extent that you go through them. Even if you didn't have any job experience or any paid work experience, that's totally okay. Make sure you're just showcasing how else you're unique and you're an amazing applicant for that university. A bonus is if you see, like, for example, a university focuses on particular values. I know there's some universities in Canada that really value like Indigenous involvement and kind of getting involved in that whole aspect of First Nations and First Nation history. So I know some students that have experience volunteering in those types of areas. That's a big bonus for them because the school has that mission and values that kind of goes along those lines too. So doing your research, what's the best school for you? What experience do you have that complements you? Because they're ultimately trying to build a class of students that represent school values. And on top of that, like all these students hopefully get along with each other really well. Okay, now let's discuss personal statement. I know some of you are wondering about like what stats and everything are really competitive, but we will discuss that kind of a little bit more in Q&A because it's more open, but making sure to go through the structure of the whole profile is also important. So I'll have Sarah and Noor go over how they went about writing their personal statement and how they kind of had it edited. But generally, the format for writing your personal statement is discussing why dentistry. There's a prompt, and that's the question prompt that they're going to ask you. So explaining like what are the different life events that happened to you that helped you kind of choose this career pathway, what you observed or like what you learned from your experiences that would make you a great applicant along with this reason of why dentistry. And it's also very useful because as Sarah said, every single school will ask you why dentistry. So you got to make sure you have a good reason for that. But yeah, and we also have an upcoming personal statement webinar happening on July 10th. I just haven't promoted it yet. But we have a previously recorded one that you can watch on our YouTube channel in terms of just everything to know about writing your personal statement.
Or do you want to get started or?
Sure. I think the biggest thing, if you're gonna take away something from the slide, is to start early and to brainstorm as much as you can and to kind of just get anything you can on the paper because slowly things will come to you and you're gonna be like, oh, like I want to include this, I want to include this. So again, like little things that make you you. For me, for example, I like cooking. My sister's going to dentistry. These are relevant things that I wanted to definitely mention in my personal statement. And it's something that if someone's reading, I want it to be unique and I don't want it to be typical, like what everyone's going to write about, you know, dentistry. I know there's a lot of templates out there about what you can write about your personal statement. I recommend going in fresh. Don't chat GPT it, don't Google it. Write it down, brainstorm, and start very, very early on so you can give it to different people to read and to edit. So, for example, I gave it to my sister, I gave it to some of her friends who are in dental school, I give it to my dad, I gave it to my cousins, anyone who I think either is in professional school or someone who I think I would appreciate their opinions on something like a dental school personal statement. I will also say that comes with some things because some people are less open-minded, so they might think like specific things that are mentioned maybe aren't appropriate or maybe they're too irrelevant. That's why I think it's important to give it to as many people as you can, not just anybody though. Be very specific with who you're giving it to. And yeah, exactly with what Shamim said, kind of think about what got you into it, talk about personal experiences, make it very personal. End of the day, they're reading about you and they don't know you. They don't know what you look like, they don't know who you are. This is what they're reading. And there's so many of you guys and it's all going to sound so familiar, so try to stand out in your own way. Yeah, that's all I can say. Sarah?
Yeah, I think as Shami mentioned earlier, you want to answer the question to why dentistry, but at the same time include everything that you want to include about yourself. So, when I was working at a dental office and I saw this, I realized that da 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 da. And you just told them that you have worked at a dental office. You definitely don't want to write a resume in the format of a personal statement. Remember that. So you don't want to look at this page and say this is just like things that this person has done listed. You want to make sure you're making something out of those experiences. You're connecting the experiences. You're connecting it back to your background. You're maybe if you've immigrated, maybe that one sort of point in your life where you were like, you know what, dentistry is for me. But then also saying that when you were working, when you were volunteering at this place, or when you were speaking to a friend that you met through the Bright Future Dentist Club or X and Y and Z. So really a combination of all of this. I personally asked for help from a mentor that offered personal statement editing services. So Dr. Bruce Freeman was who I went to. If you want, he does charge quite a lot, and there are resources that cost out there. But in my personal experience, I think that anything like this is sort of an investment, and the process of applying to dental school is going to be expensive, even if you're not using these resources. So if you have the opportunity, I think some of these services are also offered for free. So I know the workshop that Bright Future Dentist is hosting, and they hosted last year as well. Zoha, current dentist, is also going to be help you with writing your personal statement. So there's lots of different options available. Again, I really needed, I think my personal statement was going to be one of the strengths of my application. So I wanted to make sure I get as much help as I can from someone that I trust, and more specifically from someone that I trust their approach and their values to the career that they have. Because I thought, for example, Dr. Freeman had a more similar approach to his career as I would like to have to mine. So yeah, and then I had my sister edit it, I had Noor read it, I had, as Noor said, as many people as I could get my hands on that I trusted with their experience and knowledge to read it. But really remember, the interviewers, the people who are reviewing your applications are reading all these personal statements for all these different people. So if you were to read your personal statement among 100 other personal statements, which one would you remember? And like, keep that in mind as you're writing your personal statement.
I just want to add something. I went to an admissions officer like webinar where it was like one of the admissions officers of Columbia University. She was kind of talking about like kind of like do's and don'ts. You guys can check out recordings of that. It was hosted by Leland. I'll put like their name in the chat. But they have recordings of all their webinars kind of. And she was kind of saying like, you don't necessarily want to explain in your personal statement like bad things that happened to you throughout your major that made you kind of like deter from the career, or I don't know, get bad grades or whatever, because there's another section on the ADSAS profile that discusses like what are environmental factors or like other factors that potentially you need to explain amongst your application. So something like having W's on your transcript, something like maybe failing and retaking courses, having pass fail courses. If it was during COVID, usually they're lenient, but maybe if you had to like put something as a pass fail. If you went through a really hard time throughout your undergrad and that impacted something, a part of your application, that's the place to explain that. It's not your personal statement. The personal statement is where you can shine and you can be a unique person towards these people who are reading your story. And like, of course, it's important that if that's something that made up who you are, you can share a little bit about it, but I guess kind of like make them want more. Like if they're reading your personal statement, like, and they're really interested in that, like I'm sure they would explore more of your profile if it was really engaging for them. So that's just something to note for that.
For sure. It's the time to sell yourself.
Sure, for sure.
Well, yeah, just a general like pre-dental plan. I'll skim over this because I think hopefully you guys have a good grasp of when everything is. But the next slide is what's most important and what I think would help most of you since you're in your second or third year. But in your first year, take your prereqs, join clubs such as BFD if you would like, do sports, volunteer, community service, and connect with your first year science profs. I can't emphasize that enough, but nobody knows this in first year. They just take their Gen Chem, they just take their bios, and then later they reach third year and fourth year, they're like, oh, I never once talked to my first year biology professor. They were probably lucky if they were in a bigger, like more science major and they could kind of like engage with their upper year science professors. But myself in kinesiology, and I think Sarah can attest to that in psychology, we don't take other upper year science courses. It's just not something that's part of ours. So kind of those science profs that we took in first and second are the only ones that we've really interacted with. So yeah, and then in your second year, continue taking your prereqs, try to finish them within the next year after that. Apply for research if that's something you're interested in, but plan to take the DAT the summer after second year, which is when you're eligible to start taking it, or after your third year. And continue volunteering, continue seeking leadership roles at this point, because you've kind of had some time to establish yourself at this university and make sure you're shadowing dentists. And afterwards, third year onwards, as you're continuing to seek leadership roles, volunteering, all of that good stuff that I mentioned, you want to start networking with current dental students at the desired schools that you want to go to, because that's who you're going to hear all the intel from. That's who you're going to hear explain, like, honestly, going to this dental school was a very challenging thing. And I've heard from their like peers, maybe they're saying that this dental school has a more well-rounded experience than mine does. I know I've heard some dental students share that about the schools that they visit. Not necessarily that that's like something to deter you from a school, but that's something to factor into a school that you want to go to. For example, the school that Sarah and Nora are getting accepted to, they have a different curriculum, which is problem-based learning. So some people said that, yeah, this is so great, like this works perfectly for me. But some people are like, no, like honestly, if you're more of like a lecture-based person, this might not be the program for you. So building on those connections with the dental students and even dentists as well, and then building more on the science connections that you have so that you can have your 2 science letter of recommendations ready. Even if you're in your 4th year, kind of like me, I was like, wait, I haven't talked to anybody. What I ended up doing is, since I was planning to take a 5th year, even if you're not taking a 5th year, like I would recommend this, hopefully. Try to take like 1 to 2 science courses in the upper level, which you would be eligible for if you have the prereqs for it, and then just really try to grind it out and make connections with those professors. It's honestly a backup plan. It's not the preferred plan that I'm recommending to anyone, but if you are like, okay, I need to apply a little bit later because I'm not that prepared, my application isn't fully complete yet, that's kind of an option you can take to be able to fulfill that letter of recommendation requirement. But yeah, so for example, if you're going to be applying for the fall 2025 cycle, so maybe not this one, but the next one that's coming up, you want to try to ask for those letters of recommendations to be completed by hopefully May. So start asking early, like in February-ish, and then keep following up month after month if you have to with professors who don't reply up until May, and just don't lose hope. Continue following up with them, because as Noor said, you never know what can happen with the people that promise you to write those letters. And you want to ask your dentist as well. So one general dentist is preferred. I know some people have asked me like, hey, is it better if the dentist is a specialist instead of a general dentist? And honestly, schools don't necessarily care, but I've heard rule of thumb is a general dentist, because you're not necessarily going to know what specialty you're going to go into like once you're in dental school. But yeah, and then 2 science professors, either in biology, chemistry, physics. Some schools even accept kinesiology, and 1 non-science individual, like we said before. And then DAT, this is just like an ideal plan, guys. I know everybody's is going to be different, but have your DAT score ready by hopefully like May to July max. Like I said, like previously, end of July, last opportunity to take your DAT, hopefully, so that you can have that score in by mid to end of August, since it takes a couple weeks for it to verify. If you're taking the American DAT, you will know your score the same day that you do it, and ADSAS won't. So like it takes a couple, like, oh my God, I'm stumbling on my words, but it takes like a couple weeks for that to get through. Personal statement, start as early so you're ready to submit it by the time the applications are officially open. So start in January, continue adding little tidbits and have it reviewed. And then start writing down everything for your ADSAS application in mid-May when it opens up. I'm going to show you guys screenshots of what the ADSAS portal actually looks like. But yeah, so this year the applications opened up June 4th, and that was the day that you were ready to press submit and everything goes into ADSAS. But don't fear if you haven't taken your DAT yet by early June, or you still don't have some of the components ready. You can still complete those things all throughout the summer, but applications are rolling. And another thing I wanted to note is if you actually have your application ready by early June, but you just don't have your DAT score, you can submit that application, because it takes some time for your application to be verified. And then whenever your DAT score is ready and that's verified, then schools will look at your application. And they actually kind of like that, because they see that, hey, this was an applicant that had their application ready by early June. This is just like when they took their DAT. So that's something that's notable for them. Another thing that I wanted to say is when you're doing your transcript entry, you can pay for a professional service from ADSAS team to do that for you. I think it costs like around like $70 US. And that helps you kind of have everything inputted correctly, so that in case, let's say you submit your ADSAS profile, it gets rejected because one of your grades don't match exactly what's on your undergrad transcript, then you have to resubmit. It's going to take another couple of weeks for you to get verified, and then everything falls behind. Yes, Noor.
Thank you. I was just gonna say yes with the paying thing, but we had a friend who used that service, paid, they actually messed it up. So her whole application got delayed by a couple weeks or something because it didn't go through. So, there's always a risk, regardless of if you're doing it or someone else is doing it. So just watch out with that. Like me or Sarah, we both did it ourselves. Just made sure to double check it a couple times. But just putting that there, they're still human, the people that are inputting it. So it's not like 100%, but I'm sure it's probably a higher rate of correctness. Just want to put that out there.
Thank you, Noor. I didn't know that. So yeah, that's actually really important to note. I don't think it's super difficult to put it in, but there's different things to note. Like for example, they take your repeated grades and they factor everything into an ADSAS GPA that's like personalized for them in terms of how they calculate it. Everything regarding how they calculate your GPA is in the ADSAS guide, but it's really important to email ADSAS and ask them questions. Like for example, on York, I know that if you repeat a course, it's noted as like NCR next to it, which means no credit received. So technically that would be 0 credits, but on ADSAS, do you still have to put the original value? That I don't know yet. I have to email and ask, but those types of questions are really important for you to figure out before the application portal opens so that you're ready to just conquer it and you don't have to wait for ADSAS or anybody else to like answer your questions until you know the answers. But yeah, we're almost done, guys. Thank you for bearing with us for this long. But the last part, landing the interview, I think it's really great if you guys reach out to Noor and Sara if you guys have specific questions about the interview process because they interviewed at different schools and each of those things would be unique. But we have 3 different webinars that you guys can not attend, sorry, watch the recordings of on our YouTube channel and get a lot of advice in terms of the interview like process, how to prepare for it and everything. But if there's any specific ways you guys practice that you wanted to mention here, that would be nice.
I think similar to the personal statement, talk to many people about their experiences with interviews. Again, for me specifically, I also took a mentoring session with Dr. Bruce Freeman again. But I do think all these resources, even without them, you should be one totally okay. I know Noor didn't take an interview prep session with him and still managed to land all acceptances from the schools she got interviews from. But yeah, focus on the things. I think interview is the time where you can when you can present yourself to people. So focus on the things you have done that are presentable to people now that you have that opportunity. And then when it comes to your interviews, I think later when you have received interviews, start doing interview preps, practice, do mock interviews with your friends. Again, if they've already gone through the process of a professional school. My sister went to law school. She didn't have an interview. She couldn't help, but she had gone through work interviews. Also, leadership positions, work experiences, volunteer opportunities. These all help you prepare for interviews because at some point in life you had to go through interviews to land those jobs. So they're very good practice in that sense, but nothing specific that I can add right now.
I'd say assess what kind of a person you are. Are you a good public speaker? Do you get shy? Do you get anxiety? And based on that, prep accordingly. So I did a bunch of mock interviews before with my sister, with my dad, some people that I'm a little bit more like not scared, but like a little more a little less comfortable with, just because that's how it's going to be with the people you interview. So it's not going to be like the best friend that you're talking to. It's going to be someone who's a bit older, faculty member. And then also you can always reach out to both of us. We can write our Instagrams on the chat again. Reach out to us. We can help you with interview preps, give you specific notes. And yeah, it's similar to Casper, similar to everything, just writing down repetition, kind of getting to know your own application, to be able to present yourself in the way that you want the faculty to know you.
Okay, so this is the last module. Nor, if you can put in your Instagrams in the chat, I was about to
Yeah.
do that. I'm doing that too. But going over the application portal and fees. So there's different factors to like look at when you're choosing different schools, such as one, Canadian accreditation, if you want to come back and you want to work in Canada, especially if you're going to a US school. So good thing to know, all US schools, you can come back and work in Canada. You just have to make sure you take the Canadian board exam. But just as how you would work in America, you would have to take the American board exam. So that's just something that's a given, but depending on that factor, if you're maybe like an international student, if you wanted to go to a different country and work, you should check out if studying in America will be accredited in the country you want to work in. Looking at the length of the program, some dental schools are 3 years, but that means you have no breaks throughout it, such as Roseman University, but many schools are generally a 4-year program. The next is curriculum style. Like I said, problem-based learning versus traditional. And there's actually scientific articles you guys can search up online on the difference between these and the benefits that students see between the two different curriculum styles. But definitely talk to dental students that are attending a school with a curriculum style of like what you're like looking towards. That will help out a lot with your kind of choosing of where to go. Next is tuition, location, graduation statistics. That's not something that a lot of people look at because they're like, okay, well, hopefully I can graduate dental school, but maybe a dental school is actually very challenging. And so that's something you may want to know because it's not necessarily always like a huge challenge you want to have, especially in like a 4-year program. You want to make sure that there's resources at the school to be able to support you throughout your academics as well. Does the school's mission statement align with your beliefs? That's something that they're going to ask you in their interview. They're going to be like, why do you want to go to this school? So have a good reason for that as well. Can't just be like, for example, USC, oh, I want to live in LA. Like, that's not something you can say, even though I know deep down that's what Noor was thinking.
It's always a plus. I think actually, if for interviews specifically, it's nice to get a bit personal. Definitely still stay professional, but like you can always crack a little joke in there. Like I always, for Dalhousie, I joked at the end, I was like, and I love seafood. So it's a real answer. You know, you're a real person. They want to hear the real answers. The weather for sure is like 80%. So here we are.
But yeah, sorry, you were gonna say something.
No, I was just gonna say that could be a part of the reasons. It probably won't be the only reason. So if they ask you that question, it shouldn't be I like seafood and so I want to come to
Yeah, for
Dalhousie.
sure.
But it's
For
definitely a part of the
Yeah,
experience
just
going to
put it
Dalhousie.
in the end.
So I also agree with Nora. I think if it contributes, if you can talk about how you have realized throughout undergrad that the location in which you study motivates you or not, and how you rely on the sun, and LA sounds like a better option in that regards. So yeah, that can also contribute to the reason.
Okay, so the application portal, like I said, and I've been saying it's Adea AdSAS. You have to go on there, you have to make an account, and you also have to associate it with a dent pin for your DAT as well. So make sure you have all those numbers saved somewhere safe. You also get like a applicant number as well when you're kind of opening this up. So those are numbers that you can kind of like have somewhere secured, but definitely everything will be on the AdSAS like page for you to see. These are just like links that you guys can check out, but I've put them in the resource guide. Oh no, can you guys see this picture?
No.
Okay, let me just do this. Maybe you can see it this way. Okay, let me just zoom in a bit so you guys can see. Hello, you guys were just able to see it. Okay, guys, hold on. I have it right here.
Get really familiar with this page she's gonna show you because you're gonna have to me and Sarah, I think, visited it almost maybe even twice or 3 times a day, just because you see your stats here, you see your status here. You're gonna be spending a lot of time adding your personal statement. You're gonna be writing all your grades, all your volunteer experience, all your extracurriculars, everything, and your references. So the page, if she can show you, is where everything is, your high school grades, your transcripts. Oh, and definitely get your transcripts in on time as well, because I know for York and for my Ryerson took a couple days or weeks. So, don't leave it for the last minute. Order them ahead. A lot of the times they have to be mailed. physically. And I remember that for both of us took around 2 weeks. So, or 3 weeks, I don't know. But what is going on? Leave some space for that.
Yeah, that platform causes some trauma, both financially, emotionally. Um, and I think that's something to keep in mind. I think the process of dental school and applying to dental school is a financially hefty process. Um, and I think in some ways, even it reminds you of what you're going to sign yourself up for with high tuition rates. So be prepared for that. And I think yeah, in regards to checking the status of your access as well, I remember like scrolling down the list of the schools I've applied to, and I've applied to a lot. You can see them on the resource list that link that Shamin provided. And then you would, throughout time, you would see like rejected, 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 invited for interview, and that would like make your day. And later acceptances, and throughout time, you would see how this like the statuses are changing. And it was a very, very hopeful process.
So I just got a picture of what it looks like when you open it and the PTSD that Noor and Sarah are talking about. So you have kind of like these four little blocks here, which is like your personal information, academic history, supporting information, and your program materials. And you can kind of see all your notification updates here, like, hey, coursework like verified, your transcript received, and those are good things to kind of see. You want to make sure that you're consistently checking for updates and you're following up and emailing if, let's say, a couple weeks passed by and they didn't get your transcript yet. Okay, let me go back to the presentation. I'm worried you're not going to see these pictures, so I'm just going to show them like here first, and then we'll like go back into presentation mode afterwards. But personal information, it's kind of like literally everything about you that's boring. But the environmental factors portion that I was talking about is here. So talking about the hardships, talking about something that you had to go through, or like if you come from like a low income family, like your socioeconomic like status, whatever the case may be, like that's here in this section, talking about where you're from, who your parents are, your contact information, your citizenship, everything. Your academic history will include the colleges or universities you attended, the high schools you attended, and when you graduated, putting in every single grade that you took throughout your undergrad, as well as any standardized tests. So I know some people that like take GREs and stuff, like they would like put that there, but they really only care about the DAT that you took because all the other like kind of tests that you took are not applicable to the schools you're applying to. But here, you would either input a score that you already had and like you already like received. So if you took the DAT already once, you would put in that score there. You have to put your DENT PIN. And then if you're going to be taking the DAT still, but you still haven't applied, you have to put in an expected date for when your test is booked. And they won't really consider your application too much until your DAT score is received, which is why your DAT should be taken earlier, but they will have that there, and that's still a positive thing for them. Like, okay, they're going to be taking their DAT, or they're going to be retaking to improve the score of their DAT. The next is supporting information. So like we said, like evaluations, like experiences, achievements, licenses. So if you're a dental assistant or if you have any other licenses or like certifications and stuff, you would put that there. And last but not least, your personal statement, which is 4,500. Yes, 4,500 characters, not words. So every letter, every space, every dot, every comma counts. And the last but not least section is adding your desired schools. I'm just going to go into presentation mode again. So the ADEA ADSATS application fee for your very first dental school is $264, and I believe this is USD. And each additional school that you apply to is $115. Very expensive. This is not something that is going to be low cost. However, I'll discuss in the next slide ways you can go about this. On top of that, every school has a different supplementary application fee as well, such as the Cura assessment, which is basically kind of like a pre-recorded video interview. You have to pay to do that. As well, there's other forms that you have to fill out that vary between each school. And sometimes the forms are something that they'll send out to everybody who applies, but sometimes they'll be like, hey, there's these extra forms for you to like submit, and you have to just kind of keep checking to see what's going on and if a school is requesting something from you. For your interview, keep in mind that if you secure one, you may have to travel to that place that you got an interview from, stay in a hotel near the school, and consider the cost of traveling there, such as like plane, train, car, your hotel, or like motel accommodations and food. And last but not least, when you're accepted to a dental school and you decide to attend, you have to give them a deposit. And this is something that applies towards your first year tuition, but it's also non-refundable. So if you decide that you don't want to go to the school for whatever reason, maybe you got into another school, you have to kind of forfeit that money. You don't get it back. And this deposit can range from either $500 to $5,000 USD. So they're very expensive. And I usually recommend that students find a way to be able to cover this amount. Some students kind of get that money and help from their parents or their family. I've heard of some people that have small lines of credits from before that they're eligible through their bank, and they kind of have that aside for when they do need to take out some money to pay deposits, and so on. But I will have Noor and Sarah share their experience with this now.
Yeah, I just wrote in the chat, as you see with the numbers on the screen, and I mentioned earlier, it's a financially hefty process. Like writing your DAT, sending your DAT to different schools, sending your transcript, ordering an online transcript. And then sometimes if you're like sending the first version of your transcript and later you're trying to update it, ordering another. So it might be like small amounts that are getting added up as you go. And then the application process itself, which has bigger amounts, and then the deposit, and then later the tuition. That being said, I don't want any of this to discourage you if you're already on this path, but it is something that you have to be aware of. And it is a long-term investment. You soon realize this. And that's when I mentioned earlier, I personally decided to spend also some money on getting services for my personal statement as well as my interviews. And I also approached that as a long-term investment that I was making. So don't let that discourage you, but there's tons of application fees and tons of little fees. Traveling, renting a car, the Uber that you're gonna get or the bus that you're gonna ride, getting to your hotel, the food that you're gonna have as you stay there. There's lots of things, but again, don't let that discourage you. I think they're trying to introduce you to how hefty the tuition is going to be. And there's always going to be financial aid that you can apply for, maybe not before dental school, but as soon as you get your acceptances, there's lines of credits available from banks, both for American schools and Canadian schools. There's private loans with higher interest. There's lots of different options. And again, long-term investment. Nor is there anything you want to add?
No, I think you covered it all. And, end of the day, if not in the first year, in the next couple years after you graduate, you're gonna make all the money back. So again, like she said in the chat, long-term investment in yourself. So don't worry. And sometimes paying the extra to do certain things, like she said, with getting the help of a mentor, gives you a peace of mind because you did the best you can, and later on you're not going to regret it. And that might save you money in the sense of maybe you don't need to do it a second cycle. So you actually end up saving a lot more money by investing in yourself and in the process from the start. So, but if you have any questions, reach out. But yeah, it is what it is. It's okay.
Okay, guys. So one at least bright side after like all of these things being so expensive, is that you can apply for financial aid through ADEA at SAS to cover the application fees. And as well, for taking your DAT, you can apply for that financial reimbursement. They understand that some students honestly cannot afford this. There's many students I know that even pay for their like undergrad tuition on their own. They don't get like government like help or anything, or they don't live in an area where they qualify for such a thing. So take advantage of these resources, but I will say this is something you have to apply for very early on. Like I would say even look into it like a month and a half before the applications even open for like writing it. So like before May, like in April and stuff, start like inquiring with ATSAS, like, hey, when is this gonna open? Because literally They opened this year in May 14th. You were able to start filling it out and everything, put your list of schools in, submit by June 4th, but then June 6th, they sent a notification saying all of the funding has been used up. They don't have any more funding left. So anybody that wanted to like apply like and put in like their application like later in June or even like mid-June, no more funding left, sorry. They said that they would keep you updated if there's more funding, but this is just something you have to be really keen on because there's so many students that are trying to take advantage of these opportunities. Okay, so I'm not going to get into this because you can see it all on our resource page, but this is just another way for you to look at Canada accredited dental programs and how to apply to different international schools such as Ireland, New Zealand, or Australia. And we also have a webinar on International Dental Student Journey, which you can check out on our YouTube page. Okay, so list of Canadian-friendly US dental schools. What does this mean? This is schools that accept Canadian students as out of state, and they don't necessarily look at you as like an international student, because there are some schools that don't accept any international students as well. But this is also schools that would accept the Canadian DAT. I got this from the BMO website last year, but Noor can attest that there's actually a few more that accept the Canadian DAT, and you can find her school list in the resource guide that I shared earlier as well. So Noor, if there's anything you want to say about that, you can mention.
I just want to add that Google is your best friend, but sometimes the universities don't actually mention whether or not the Canadian or the US one is what's it called? Allowed. And me and Sarah struggled with that a bit because like she obviously did the US one, but I kept saying like, wait, I don't remember, like, is this one allowed? Is that one not allowed? And you have to pay per school. And then there's a secondary fee you have to pay after you pay the original fee on AdSense. So, you definitely don't want to. I made that mistake. I applied to a couple of places. I realized afterwards don't even accept it because they didn't mention it. So reach out in advance, email them because a lot of them don't respond back quick or they don't respond at all. So you have to be very vigilant. You have to call a couple times and see if the ones that don't mention it, do they actually accept it or not? Because I was bamboozled when I found out after I paid.
And also, I mentioned this earlier, but every year schools can change their policies and what they accept or not. So, for example, if you see Temple on this list because Noor has applied and she had a Canadian DAT, that does not mean the next year this rule will stay the same or this policy will stay the same. What I highly recommend for the application process from A to Z is being organized and creating spreadsheets or in a notebook, in a specific notebook, making track of all these things. You're going to have these things in your emails, but it's going to be all over the place. So make a spreadsheet. Do all these schools accept Canadian DAT? Do they accept American DAT? What are their specific prerequisites that are school specific? So microbiome, not all schools need it, but there are some that do. And if those schools are on the list of schools you'd like to attend, it's important to also keep track of them. Lots of other questions are going to come up as you're applying, and that spreadsheet can be your go-to to navigate that process.
We've finally reached Q&A. So
Yay!
now is the time to ask your questions. Feel free to use the raise your hand feature to even say your question out loud and you don't have to type it. But I'm going to start reading through the chat to see if there's anything that we need to bring up.
I know someone, before you ask your questions, I know someone was asking about post-bac programs as well as community colleges. I would appreciate if someone knows any more information than I do. From what I understood in the process of applying, schools look for courses that are taken at accredited North American institutions. Now, some schools specified that this needs to be universities, and some schools didn't. With what Noor said about the DAT, that the fact that they did not mention it does not mean that it is allowed. So reach out to them. In regards to course equivalence, you can always submit your course curriculum as you ask that question. If the course curriculum covers what you need to learn to have that prerequisite, they'll review it and they'll get back to you. But consider all of these things school specific. So reach out to every single school that you're interested in applying to.
Shamim, can I reply to a recent question?
Yeah. No worries.
Okay. So someone asked about retaking prereq courses. I don't think Sarah retook any courses, right?
No, I
Yeah,
didn't.
okay. So I retook actually two, I think. Math and Gen Chem. Can't do them. And I think, yes, there's a stigma around like retaking courses. Even I was aware of that because it was like preferably try to get at least a C plus so you don't have to do it. But again, I think it all goes, I haven't had any problems and no one's asked me anything about it so far. I think it all just goes back to the overall trend of your transcript. Like, are you retaking them still in third year and fourth year and fifth year? Are your grades looking up? What's the trend? What's the reason for the retake if there's so many? If there's just a couple courses in first year or second year that, you got under a C plus, it's fine. It's not a big deal. No one's brought it up in an interview so far. I know a school in Miami, Nova, they offered a virtual on the phone consult if you got rejected. And I did that. And the guy on the phone, he was like, okay, I see you retook these courses. I mean, sorry, he's like, I saw you got under a C plus or something. Like we prefer that you don't. And I was like, well, I did retake it. And he basically was just like, oh, I guess your transcript didn't get upgraded. I see now you retook it. So that's why it's important to, when you do apply originally, to have the best grades forward. I know someone else recently also asked, like, is it okay if I is like if I apply, I don't know, with some other courses instead of like the courses that have my prereq grades. It's really important to have your prereqs and the proper prereqs if you're retaking them, preferably. Just because sometimes they don't get updated at SAS, the first round that they see, sometimes it's hard to update. I had to message them specifically being like, hey, I updated my transcript. Did you guys see this? And also just to talk about one other question, specifying about the schools, like she said, if anyone didn't see for the YouTube, you can put, I think, five or more. I think more than five. I don't remember. You can specify an amount and you can pay for that, but you can always add them on later as well. But it is free for the first five. So definitely definitely use those five for the five that you're sure of.
Some earlier questions that came up is what would you consider as a high GPA? From what I've seen in a lot of like forums and like from advisors and stuff, this varies like school to school because some schools will accept lower GPAs, but like making it up with like higher DAT scores, better like profiles and stuff. But generally, like what I've seen for like American is like 3.5 is like a good benchmark for like being competitive. But of course, anything above that is like a big bonus. Like 3.6, 3.7 is what I have seen a lot of the dental schools have as like a general mean GPA. But dental schools also look at your science GPA too. So you may have like an overall GPA of like 3.9, 4.0, no, not 4.0, but like let's say like 3.8 or something. That makes more sense with what I'm trying to say next. But your science GPA, which includes your biology, your physics, your chemistries, stuff like that, they calculate that separately, and that might be really low or that might be really high. So, for example, somebody that is like, I don't know, has like really great grades and like they're more like psychology major, for example, but in their science like courses, they're not really doing that great. They're going to be like, well, we were looking at your science GPA and we were trying to see like if you would have the capabilities for doing well in dental school courses as well because they're science related. Those are just the different factors to look at. If you guys have anything about GPA you wanted to mention, let me know.
Yeah, I'm an example of the person that had a lower science GPA and a higher GPA relative to my science GPA. So I took most of my science courses in my first year, and I had no idea what I was doing in my first year. I had three C pluses for my major prerequisites. So I remember at USC on the day of the interview, they asked you to write out the grades of your prerequisites. And I remember going through the list and I wrote C plus, C plus, another C plus, and then I had a B and a B plus for the other ones. And I remember USC, like the prereqs that were listed on that sheet were the first year prereqs. So it was a very, very sad moment for me. But I
She
got
still got it.
Yeah, I got accepted to USC, and I actually shared that as an example because I had a lot of improvement on my transcript, and my upper year courses, they were better, and I think that said a lot about what I was doing in my undergraduate years. Rahman, you asked if we mind sharing our GPAs. I don't mind it. My overall GPA was a 3.7, and my science GPA was a 3.3. I took 5 years at university, so I had more courses to count for my GPA. That's always something that if you don't feel comfortable with your GPA at the end of fourth year, and if you have the opportunity to take more courses, that's always an option to help you improve your GPA. It's not the end of the world when you have like bad grades in your transcript. I do think having a good trend is important. And again, I remember another like upper year, my microbiome course, which I took in my fifth year, I had a B on there again, even though most of my grades from that year were A's and A pluses. So it's not the end of the world. And like the more people you talk to, you realize, I remember Nikki, Noor's sister, who's now at Western Dental School, so a Canadian school. She was doing a webinar the first time I attended one of the Bright Future Dentist webinars, and she also mentioned she had 2 C pluses on in her first year, and she's now at Western. And so that's just a reminder that if you've retaken courses, it's no big deal. You obviously, if you're in your early years at school, you want to try to avoid that because GPA is still an important part of your application, but it's specifically for American schools. And I was chatting to someone privately about this just a few minutes ago, but specifically for American schools, they have a more holistic approach. So it's really not the end of the world when you have some grades in your transcript that are lowering your GPA.
Somebody asked earlier, like, what do the courses with W's or course relief and pass fail, like how they matter on your transcript? And I think Sarah answered that, but you want to try to not have them. But of course, like if you did, I think the best way to go about it is to explain in your profile why you have them. They're not necessarily going to judge you for something in particular, like especially if you took that prereq and you made sure you got like a decent mark in it or you met the minimum requirements for the mark. That's what they will mainly look at. I actually haven't heard of anybody that got judged for having way too many W's on their transcript, since they overall look at your GPA and everything, but it might be a factor that comes up in the interview for them. If you guys know any other questions, bring it up, Sarah and Noor, but if you guys feel like your question wasn't answered, just drop it again in the chat.
Regards to Nova, I also don't know much about it. I did actually apply to Nova. I think my login for the platform wasn't working, and you're gonna run into this a lot where you're gonna be like, you know what, screw it, I don't want to continue this. And I just never fixed my login, and so I don't know much about the school. I wish I could help, but no. Would you say it's possible to study for the DAT while taking courses while working part-time, or would you say it's better to focus fully on the DAT? Noor touched on this earlier. If you have the opportunity to only focus on the DAT, that's always recommended. I think this also depends on a person-to-person basis. I have worked all my life, at least part-time, during school. And I still felt like I needed to take that time off to study for my DAT. If you're studying for the DAT for a longer period of time than I was doing, maybe you can't take off of work for that long. And two, maybe I can see the case where it might help you balance your academic and work like your daily lifestyle. For me, like connecting with people is really important. It really fuels me. So even going to work is an opportunity to connect with people. I definitely don't recommend working a lot though. I recommend working probably less than you would be even if you're in school. But it's really on a person-to-person basis. I do think that the more focus you have for these exams, the better routine you're going to find. Even getting up at the same time, sleeping at the same time every day, and work might be interfering with that. So in that regards, and again, it's really up to if that's even possible for your needs.
Yeah, and also to respond to Mahtab and Rahman, as an international student, I also messaged someone privately. I think the best thing to do for dentists is if you don't know, again, people, you can always reach out to oh my God, Bright Future Dentists and see if they have any opportunities. But besides that, I think it's really nice because anytime you go in person, they're seeing you as a person, they're seeing your face, they're much more probably going to be open to being like, yeah, for sure, because it's very common for dental clinics to have people shadow. So as long as you just kind of explain the situation, as I said, be respectful. If it's down your street or if you see a really popular one or your own dentist, it's the best way to approach by just saying, I'm applying to dental school. I want to see what it's like more, give them, like Sarah said, a flexible schedule, and hope for the best. And also for Rahman, he said if they can get full tuition. It's very dependent on the tuition price. Like for example, USC and NYU are supposed to be the two more expensive ones in the US. So in Canada, the experience I've had at least is that they give you 375K, depends obviously on the situation, and it might not be like valid for everybody, but at least my situation, the 375, and then if you're specializing, they give you another 25K at the end. But that, for example, doesn't, and it's in Canadian, that doesn't like fully cover the tuition. But for another school that's cheaper, that can potentially cover all of it. But again, it's hefty, it's a little bit strenuous to be able to pay the tuition. There's like a whole deal with like getting co-signers and all that. You have to show a lot of finances. Maybe Sarah can touch more on that because she also was like looking into this for different schools. I've only really looked into it for NYU and USC, which were both basically almost the exact same tuition price. And the Canadian loan did not cover that fully.
Yeah, so if you're taking loans from Canadian banks to apply to American schools, they're going to ask for your acceptance and a co-signer. Now, your co-signer has to provide financial evidence that they can cover your loan in case you cannot repay it, which means that they have to have a specific income. So it's important to have that person, that co-signer that can do this for you. In my case, my parents don't work. So I'm not an international student, but my parents don't have income in Toronto. So it's a difficult process of getting, they can't be my co-signers. Luckily, I had family members in the States. I actually still haven't, because I'm waiting for Dalhousie as well. I haven't started or finalized the process of getting a loan. But it is, I found a family member in the States that's willing to be a co-signer for American banks as well. Or if you can find a family friend, someone here in Toronto that can be a co-signer for you, then the process is easier. I know that I applied for a loan as a Canadian citizen. I don't know if it's the same for international students. I don't, from what I remember, I know of a student that I can connect you with that might be able to help you more, Rahman, that is starting at McGill this year. And she is an international student. And I know she is more familiar with the process of getting loans for international students. Not sure if it's possible, but you can definitely, I can connect you to her and you can reach out. In regards to connections that Noor also touched about, I think whether you're international or not, you're still spending your 4 years in undergrad, and that's a very good opportunity to get to know people, network. We host the DentNet. We literally bring dentists to you, we bring dental students to you, and that's your opportunity to get to know them. And find people, really, there's like certain people, I myself am one of them. I like connecting people to each other. I just messaged Mahtab to message me privately, but reach out to them if you have specific questions. I'm looking for an international student that is applying this cycle, and I need to ask questions about loans. And I'm going to try to find someone in that circumstance to connect you to, or I'm looking for this dentist that specializes in whatever. So find those people in your community. And there's a group chat that we have on WhatsApp that all our members are in, all our general members, executive members, and they can always help you as well. So I'm looking for shadowing opportunity. Does anyone know of a dentist that's taking on shadowing students or yeah, Rahman, you can always also DM me. I'll put my handle again in the chat. But about any connections, I'm more than happy if I have them to try to connect you.
Yes, no. You're muted.
Here we are. Just to add on, this year of applying, I've like rediscovered Reddit, and I just want to share with you guys because like first off, Reddit is like almost anonymous vibes. So if you're uncomfortable with like people knowing who you are and what questions you're asking, Reddit's definitely a place that you can maybe not be super known about what you're asking, like even in the dental community. So I'm a part of a page called Pre-Dental, and it's for the US mostly because everyone in the US is very active. The amount of questions people ask every day is like insane because you basically get answers to questions you didn't even know you had. So I recommend everybody go make a Reddit account and check out Pre-Dental. Okay, I shall find the link. And then also when you do apply, you're gonna see because everyone's always kind of keen to see, okay, who got an interview? Have they sent interviews out yet? Like, what's the situation? And there's very live updates. And it's very nice because I myself have asked many questions on the Reddit pages, asking about different universities and everything. Yes, Doctor Network as well has a page for every single dental school, both in Canada and the US. I'd say Student Doctor Network is a bit less active than Reddit, but even that is great. And you can see from past years what time they got interviews, how big was the class size. Just again, all these questions and things that can be really useful. For Canada, it's not really that like useful because they're not that active. But I'll share the link right now.
Does anybody have any more questions that they wanted to ask? Student Doctor Network is also a good forum. The DAP Bootcamp Facebook group chat is also a really great chat to join. I honestly find it very useful. A lot of students post their stats. They post like places that they got into. They post breakdowns of how they studied for the DAT. So helpful for me. It also like reassured me that like having certain grades for some courses, like other people still got in and everything. And like it kind of showed me that if you are coming from like a lower GPA or anything like that, or like a lower DAT score, there's always ways that you can make up for it in your application. So definitely like not everybody has a crazy like 24 or 25 like on their DAT. Like many students even have 19s, 18s that get into dental school. It just depends on what the school is. And again, doing that research for it can really help you out. But I just wanted to say before, if anybody has any more questions, thank you so much to Sarah and Noor for participating in this webinar today. Your insights, your lessons, and everything have been so valuable, and I'm so grateful that you both did this today. And thank you so much to everybody that joined us. I really hope and wish you all the best of luck with all your endeavors towards dental school. If you guys need anything, please don't like hesitate to reach out to Bright Future Dentist on Instagram. In our DMs, we are always welcome to help you along and connect you to the right people, like Sarah and Noor said earlier. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Of course.
Thank you for having us, and
Good luck,
good
everybody.
luck.
Hopefully, yeah.
Be patient during this process.
Oh, be
You
patient.
got this.
For sure, be patient. So important.
Very, very.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Glad
Have a good night, everyone.
you
I'm so glad it's been helpful.
Yay.
Atena, are you here?
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
You're very welcome. Were we able to answer some of the questions that you had?
Yeah, actually, all of them. So thank you so much for your time.
You're
Almost all
very
the
welcome.
questions were answered. If anything does come up, can I contact you further on?
You can always contact me, and I know Noor also dropped her handle, but I know this was like perfect timing because Shamim, I think you've actually met Atana's sister, Dr. Golrang, Elham. Um,
Oh, I
and
think so. Yeah,
Noor,
yeah.
this is an interesting story because she did her dental school back in Iran, and then she did the exams here, and signed up to did her first two exams and signed up to go to university. She paid her deposit, and during that time, she also did her skills exam and got accepted with the examination, but U of T said that they're not going to return her deposit to her or her tuition. So even though she was a dentist in Iran and then here through the examination, she still went through the 3-year equivalency program at U of T as well. So she now has two DDS degrees from Iran, and not only has it been converted, like certified in Canada, but she also has her Canadian degree from U of T. And so, Elham messaged me yesterday. Altan had some questions. So she messaged me today, and I was like, this is the perfect timing. Like, we're going to talk about everything in the seminar.
Yeah, thank you guys.
You're very welcome.
Thanks
Reach
for
out if you
coming.
have any more questions. Yeah, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, it's
They're
always
recorded on our YouTube. Sorry, Sarah. But if there's anything missed, you can go on the YouTube channel for Bright Future Dentist and watch anything over.
Sure, sure. Thanks. Sounds good. Thank you so much.
you're very welcome.
Have a good
Have a
night.
good night, guys.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hi, family.
Hey everyone.
Hello.
چه camera
How y'all
هاتون
doing?
روشن می‌کردین.
I don't like how I look on Zoom, so
Fair enough. It just
fair
feels
enough, I
good.
guess. Yeah, thanks so much for all the information. I'm kind of going through all the horrors of applying to dental school in, for US, and it's a lot worse than the Canadian process. So, yeah, thanks for all the information.
I think you know this better than anyone at this point, but we're always there for the questions. So just like specific questions, general questions, whatever, message me if there's anything that like Noor had in her experiences that were different from mine. Message her, and we will get you through this just as they got us through this.
Yeah, thanks. Well, let's do it then.
Yeah,
All right.
let's do it.
Have a good night, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.
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 Bye-bye.
Whoa, that was long.
Are you gonna stop this